Chapter 929. The sword light dissipated, and the Grey Army's leader, Hui He, retreated with serious injuries. His remaining powers disappeared along with his ring. The Black Army's leader, Grade, seemed to have been turned into dust. It was unknown whether he was dead or alive, and his whereabouts could not be seen. This scene on the TV live broadcast could be said to have shocked the eyes of countless viewers. However, Jessica did not care about all these. Looking at this scene, a hint of an admiring smile appeared on her face. She felt an increasingly heartfelt admiration for Fang Xinjian's cultivation. It was as if she was looking at a high mountain and flowing water. She bowed toward the Panwei sword. Then she was encompassed by sword light and flew out in the direction of the Kunlun Mountains. She left behind over 10,000 spectators who watched in a daze as her silhouette disappeared into the horizon. In the television station's live broadcast studio, Professor Loretta was dumbfounded. The female host at the side said hesitantly, "Professor, this is—" Fang Xinjian repelled the joint attacks of the two commanders? She looked at this scene in disbelief. Professor Loretta was also stunned for a moment. It seemed so. She recalled her earlier confident judgment and said a little awkwardly, "No one would have expected that Fang Xinjian would be able to take on two commanders single-handedly." She then sighed and revealed a deep look of worry. "But his actions will probably bring about a great upheaval to the entire Earth. The world is going to change." In North America, in the manor, Jessica's family, who had been in despair and seemed to be at the end of their rope, was now looking at the scene on the television with a hint of ecstasy on their faces. "He won?" Jessica's father suddenly laughed out loud in pleasant surprise. "Excellent, excellent, excellent." Jessica's choice back then was really right. Lord Fang Xinjian defeated the two commanders single-handedly. With this backing, there's no need for our clan to worry about not being able to rise up. He then stood up abruptly. "This won't do. I have to buy plane tickets to the Kunlun Mountains immediately. If we're late, we probably won't have a share." Jessica's younger brother also relaxed, but when he heard his father's words, he couldn't help but mutter, "Dad, do you have to be in such a hurry to suck up to them? Although he has won now, he has offended both the Grey Army and the Black Army. Moreover, he has killed so many people in one go and will definitely be besieged by the other armies to make things difficult for him. If he goes now, he might just end up as cannon fodder." Jessica's father was taken aback for a moment, then nodded, "You're right, I was too impatient. Since that's the case, let's wait a little longer and see what attitude the 13 armies have toward this matter." Just as Jessica's father was making the decision, the Gold Army's commander, Edward, was watching the entire battle from a faraway space station above the atmospheric layer. When he saw that both Hui He and Grade were pushed back, the corners of his lips curled up into a hint of a smile. Hints of golden light flashed to and fro in void space as his emotions changed. He mumbled, "Interesting. Another character has finally appeared on this planet." As he spoke, he once again buried his head in the laboratory in the space station. It was as if no matter how great the things that happened on Earth were, they would not be able to attract his attention. In the European direction, in the ancient castle in the Despair Mountain Range, the Yellow Army's leader, the King of Trepidation, looked at the live broadcast on the screen and laughed out loud. The Abomination Sovereign, who seemed to be stitched together, said, "What's wrong, brother? Why are you still laughing? That Fang Xinjian has killed the witch." "So what if one person died?" The King of Trepidation stood up, and a tremendous amount of spiritual chi of trepidation spread out with his movements, causing panic within a range of several hundred lis. Countless agonizing cries pierced through the sky as if they had sunk into the deepest part of a nightmare. "A great opportunity has come. Can't you see it?" The King of Trepidation smiled coldly and said, "Fang Xinjian has broken the stalemate. It's impossible for the Grey Army to compromise, and a great battle is unavoidable. From now on, Earth will gradually be in chaos. And we can finally spread fear without any restraints. Is there a better opportunity to spread fear than war? Darkness Current, who was covered in yellow robes, said, "In that case, we should thank Feng Xinjian properly." Of course, we should thank him properly. The King of Trepidation revealed a hint of a brutal smile. "I'll get him to give him the most terrifying nightmare in the world, and let him feel my gratitude." In the sky above East Asia, a stream of invisible and colorless air currents flashed by. In the middle of the air currents was a black ring, and the ring kept flying without a trace. Eventually, it landed in a dense forest deep in the mountains. At the next moment, the air currents slowly changed in color. In the blink of an eye, they turned into a lump of pitch-black smoke that encompassed the ring. It looked as if someone had scattered a lump of ink in the air. The smoke then slowly condensed into a form, taking on Grade's appearance. Right now, hints of lingering fear still flashed on Grade's face. The Panway sword's final round of sword light seemed to have been engraved in his mind, constantly making him experience the feeling of terror. However, as he slowly sensed his current situation, a hint of astonishment flashed on his face. Then an uncontrollable ecstasy rose in his eyes. It was because he discovered that although the series of sword light from earlier had shattered 99% of the ring's powers, it had also wiped out all the greedy souls he had released. Due to the Black Ring's powers being the wills of countless Black Army's warriors, these greedy souls were tightly bound together with his will. They also possessed the characteristic of engulfing everything in the world. He had only managed to wipe out 1/3 of them despite coming up with all sorts of means over the years. However, right now there was no longer any other consciousness in his body. The engulfing souls had been completely wiped out. At this moment, all of the Black Ring's powers would be enjoyed by him alone. There were no longer those endless arguments and shouts in his mind, and he felt an unprecedented sense of relaxation. The black energy in the ring was gushing out incessantly. He had never felt that it would be so easy to use these powers. There were no longer any obstructions or restraint. Although 99% of the ring's powers he had used previously had been wiped out, as long as he had the Black Ring, he would be able to recover very quickly. He could even take another step forward and grasp even greater powers than before. As the black energy continued to gush into his body, the greedy desires seethed increasingly, causing his body to tremble slightly. The image of the Panway sword kept on seething in Grade's mind. "That sword! I want that sword! I want him!" Chapter 930. Endless desires seethed incessantly in Grade's body. As these intense desires seethed, the ring's energies that he could borrow also grew increasingly stronger. As the ring's energies in his body grew increasingly stronger, his desires also grew increasingly intense. There had never been a moment when he wanted something so intensely. However, without the side effects of engulfing the souls of the dead, he still maintained the last hint of rationality at the bottom of his heart despite being almost engulfed by his greedy desires. The current me is still not a match for him. The corners of Grade's lips curled up into a hint of an excited smile. "But it's fine. After I snatch all of them, you'll be able to get back my sword." The image of the 13 colored rings flashed in his mind, and the greed in his eyes grew even stronger. Just as Grade was silently increasing his powers, a gray light flashed past the top floor of the world's tallest building in the extreme north, the heaven-connecting tower that symbolized the Grey Army's rule. It was Hui He's ring, which had traversed several thousand lis and returned to his side. Looking at the ring before him, Hui He's countenance was extremely grim. Compared to Grade, who had used the engulfing souls of the dead to fend off the calamity for himself, Hui He was not so lucky. He had taken on an attack from the Panway sword head-on. Although he had not gone over with his physical body, he had used his will to cross a distance of several thousand lis with the help of the ring's energies. This attack had dealt his will serious injuries. Most of the warriors in the 13 armies still maintained their mortal bodies. They could only circulate the ring's energies, or be like Grade, who had only left behind their consciousness. Their bodies were completely formed from the ring's energies. Only then would they not be afraid of physical attack. The circulation of the ring's energies depended on one's temperament and will. It did not matter how much of the ring's energies were depleted from the collisions of energies and all sorts of attack. It was because these energies came from different rings, and they would recover on the next day. Only the damage to their will would cause their strength to drop tremendously. It was because after their will was damaged, the amount of energy they could draw from the rings would be reduced, and the recovery speed of their will would be extremely slow. Grade's luck was good. He had used the engulfing souls of the dead to negate the damage from this sword attack. Although he had depleted a tremendous amount of energy, his will was almost unharmed. This was also a blessing in disguise. He had single-handedly taken over the entire Black Army's ring's energies. However, he was not so lucky. Right now, his will was seriously injured, and his entire brain was aching as if someone had shoved a nail into it. The energy that he could draw from the ring's energies had also been reduced by at least half. Sensing the condition of his body, his expression became even more gloomy. Fang Shijian, you've won this round. The next round won't be so easy. After saying that, he waved his hand and gestured to the secretary beside him, saying, "Inform all the commanders of the other armies that I want to call for a Level 1 alert meeting." The secretary was stunned and said hesitantly, "Isn't it too serious?" A Class 1 alert conference was a conference that could only be held when the Legion commander discovered a crisis that concerned the survival of the entire Earth. This was a rule set by the 13 heroes after the first onslaught. But until now, this Level 1 alert meeting had only been held once. He let out a cold laugh and said, "Fang Xinjian violated the 1-3 agreement and killed a great general of our Grey Army, instigating a civil war in the army. Don't you understand the concept of a civil war? How could this not be a matter of life and death for the Earth? Then what is?" As the news of Fang Xinjian repelling Grade and He's joint forces spread across the entire world like a typhoon passing by, what followed was an extremely peaceful calm. It was like the calm before the storm. However, almost everyone understood that it was impossible for the Grey Army to back off just like that, and it was also impossible for He to end things with Fang Xinjian just like that. Therefore, everyone held their breaths, regardless of whether they were ordinary humans or extraordinary humans. They quietly waited for the arrival of the storm. Within a short few days, the international food prices kept on rising, and all sorts of rumors of war and world wars kept on spreading. Countless ordinary humans started to hoard food, water, electricity, and petroleum. It was as if they were waiting for the end of the world and for the era of wastelands to descend. A large number of wealthy people boarded private planes and flew toward the various military bases in various countries. They were like migratory birds that were moving. Even the most ignorant people seemed to gradually realize that a great change was about to arrive. In the various armies, countless warriors trained day and night, and all of them were in the highest state of alert. The various troops were gathered, and countless missions were forcefully paused. Even the lowest-level warriors, privates, were gathered and were on standby at any moment. It was as if they were preparing to participate in a war. The various countries' governments were also on full alert. Many aircraft carriers and tanks were driven out, and almost all the countries were armed to the teeth at this moment. Countries' special forces are training and fighting in an extremely cold environment. The international food prices have once again reached a new high. The government is appealing to the citizens to purchase food rationally and not be incited by rumors. Over 20,000 people have arrived at the Kunlun Mountains to protest against the White Army's commander, Fang Xinjian's previous terrorist actions. Sea Country's replica T-98S submarine has been exposed. They are conducting a joint act with a country in the Pacific Ocean. The atmosphere across the entire Earth seemed to be getting increasingly tense. However, in the depths of the Kunlun Mountains, in the sacred White Crevice, everything was still in order. It was as if no one cared about the solemn atmosphere in the outside world. Fang Xinjian was floating in the hall, and a page of the Book of Wisdom was floating quietly before him. Countless data and words seemed to be flashing on it. After a long while, the page fell, and Fang Xinjian slowly exhaled. I've finally completed another page. During the few days that he had been staying in the sacred White Crevice, Fang Xinjian had been deciphering the contents of the Book of Wisdom. After all, the White Army had a total of 12 pages of the Book of Wisdom, including Jessica's page. After deciphering one page, he put out his hand and beckoned, and another page floated before him. As Fang Xinjian stared at it, many lines of words appeared on the Book of Wisdom. A 100-meter-long troop was advancing. The messenger walked from the back of the line to the front, and then from the front to the back. This troop had advanced exactly 100 meters. It was known that the troop's speed and the messenger's speed remained the same. How many meters had the messenger walked? Mathematics? When he was deciphering the first few pages of the Book of Wisdom, Fang Xinjian discovered that each page of the Book of Wisdom had to answer questions in various domains. Moreover, as the questions were answered, the questions would get increasingly difficult. The first question on almost every page would be the easiest. After answering all the questions, he would be able to obtain the contents of this page of the Book of Wisdom. As the questions appeared, Fang Xinjian's brain started to circulate at high speed. His brain, which was comparable to that of a supercomputer, allowed him to easily solve these questions. Fang Xinjian's eyes narrowed slightly, and the answers appeared on the Book of Wisdom. Then the next question appeared. As the questions got increasingly difficult, Fang Xinjian's gaze gradually turned grim. Chapter 931. As he went deeper into the analysis, the problems that appeared became more and more difficult. Even though Fang Xinjian had a brain that surpassed that of a supercomputer, he still felt a headache analyzing these problems, especially since many of the problems could no longer be solved with pure computing power. He had to invent some mathematical tools to solve them. Just like that, another 3 days passed by. Fang Xinjian was still analyzing this page of the Book of Wisdom. Suddenly, his gaze flickered and he seemed to have sensed something. In fact, although Fang Xinjian had the sudden inspiration ability, it was impossible for him to sense it all the time. Usually, he would sense it once every morning and once every night. If there was anything, he would sense it carefully. If there was nothing, he would just forget about it. This time, it was obvious that something had happened. Fang Xinjian's gaze flickered, and he once again sent out a clone to appear outside the hall. It did not take long for Priest Longmai and Priest Tai to fly over. They descended from the sky and landed before Fang Xinjian. "My lord." Priest Longmai bowed toward Fang Xinjian. Right now, in his eyes, Fang Xinjian was the most unbelievable existence in the world, who was the closest to the great Tao. Fang Xinjian glanced at them and asked, "What happened?" Mantai said indignantly, "Sir, he has called for a Class 1 alert recall. Right now, the Grey Army, as well as the Black Army, Red Army, Green Army, Yellow Army, Blue Army, Purple Army, Pink Army, and Orange Army have joined forces to ask you to confess. All the agents and families we've cultivated in the secular world, as well as all the major companies, have been seized." Mantai said angrily, "The most abominable thing is that the 2 disciples who were sent out to purchase supplies were also detained by them. Even though they were from the White Army, their physical bodies were still that of ordinary humans. Even though they cultivated daily, they still needed to eat. They also had their own families, relatives, and friends that they needed to take care of. Therefore, the White Army naturally had its own influence in the secular world. They also needed to frequently send people out from the sacred White Crevice to purchase and store up resources. However, they had not expected that the Grey Army would act so quickly this time around, sealing up all of their influences and even detaining the disciples who had gone out to purchase items. Confess? Fang Xinjian raised his eyebrows and said, "What else did they do?" "The 9 legions have made a joint decision," Priest Tai said with an extremely grim countenance. "I request that our white army surrender completely within 3 days, hand over all the rings, and open up the sacred white crevice. I also request that you go to the Tower of Babel alone to plead guilty and report on your work. The 9 commanders will conduct a joint trial on you." As he spoke, Mantai added, "Sir, you must not go over. They are up to no good this time. If you go, you will definitely be besieged by them." Although in the hearts of the people from the White Army, Fang Xinjian was already an existence that was extremely close to the Great Tao and possessed the strongest powers on earth, they still felt a little terrified at the thought of going up against the 9 armies at one go. The 13 armies had ruled over Earth for countless years, and their authority and power had long been deeply rooted in the hearts of the people. Right now, other than the white, silver, gold, and cyan armies, the other 9 armies had joined forces and made a joint decision to punish the White Army. This made everyone feel as if the sky was going to collapse. Priest Longmai added, "That's right. Sir, we can hold our ground in the sacred white crevice. This is a small world that is isolated from the outside world. It won't be so easy for them to attack our way in. Moreover, as long as the people from our White Army are in the sacred white crevice, we'll be able to unleash even stronger powers than before." Hearing that, Fang Xinjian merely smiled and did not reply immediately. Instead, he lifted his head, and a divine gleam flashed in his eyes. It was as if he had seen through void space, and was looking toward space-time that was extremely far away. It was only after a long while that he nodded. "So that's how it is." Priest Longmai and Priest Tai exchanged a glance, feeling that Fang Xinjian's actions were becoming increasingly unfathomable. Fang Xinjian seemed to have understood something. He turned to look at Priest Longmai and said, "Since that's the case, then give them my answer." Simultaneously, the news of the 9 armies joining forces to exert pressure, requesting for the White Army to make a complete change, and for the commander to come to the Tower of Babel within 3 days to receive a joint trial, had spread throughout the entire world. Countless news media and online media started to report on this matter. Countless people turned their gazes toward the Kunlun Mountains in East Asia, guessing how the White Army would deal with this. They can only surrender. In a program with the highest viewership ratings in North America, the silver-haired Professor Loretta said resolutely, "No one in the world will be able to go up against the 9 armies joining forces. If the White Army wishes to continue passing down its legacy, they have no other choice but to surrender." Opposite her, a Caucasian professor shook his head and said, "That might not be the case. The White Army has a long legacy, and they all have the heart to pursue the Tao. Almost none of them fear death. If Fang Xinjian insists on hiding in the sacred white crevice and putting up a stubborn resistance, then I don't think the 9 armies will be able to do anything. As time goes on, the 9 armies will have their own thoughts to begin with. It's impossible for them to keep on joining forces." "Nonsense. Even idiots like him can appear in the spotlight now?" Professor Loretta retorted, "The White Army has always been at the bottom amongst the 13 armies. Even if Fang Xinjian can single-handedly defeat 2 commanders, can he possibly go up against 9 commanders? Moreover, you don't understand the essence of this matter at all." That Caucasian professor said furiously, "You're being unreasonable. The 13 armies are of the same breadth and branch. It's impossible for them to really fight to the death. To think that someone like you can become a professor. I'm worried for the education of the country's next generation." Professor Loretta did not give the other party a chance to speak at all. She interrupted and said, "The most crucial problem in this matter is that Fang Xinjian has broken the rules and killed someone from the Grey Army. The 1-3 agreement is an iron rule, a bottom line, and the foundation for the 13 armies to unite and fight against external enemies together. Right now, what Fang Xinjian is doing To put it nicely, it's just an internal conflict. To put it bluntly, he's shaking the foundation of the entire planet and humanity. What he's doing is going against humanity and society, destroying the stability and unity of the entire Earth. Faced with such a situation, the 9 armies will definitely not back down. Although the Silver Army and Gold Army didn't say anything, not saying anything is already a tacit agreement. The White Army and Fang Xinjian have no other choice but to lower their heads. Otherwise, he'll be the enemy of all of humanity. As Professor Loretta finished speaking, a series of applause rang out, suppressing the voices of the few professors and experts who wanted to rebut. Chapter 932. In Jessica's family's villa, Jessica's father was frowning, wearing a wretched expression. Looking at the program on the television, he could not help but say, "All right, what's so good about this lousy program? Quickly turn it off." Jessica's mother said angrily, "Can't I watch the program and watch the news? Listen to Professor Loretta's analysis. If the two of you were half as good as he is, our family wouldn't be in such a state." As she spoke, she began to cry. This morning, Jessica's family's 3 companies, 12 storefronts, as well as all the properties, shares, and savings under their names had been frozen. Over 20 soldiers surrounded their villa and placed them under house arrest. Hearing the woman's complaints, Jessica's father felt even more vexed. He said impatiently, "How can a television program be real? This Loretta is just doing things for money. It's just someone from the army trying to create hype." That also shows the direction of the situation. Jessica's younger brother said anxiously, "Father, why don't you break off all ties with that stupid woman immediately? Damn it, if it wasn't because that stupid woman got involved in the 13 armies conflict, how could we be implicated?" Under the Grey Army's propaganda, most of the humans were naturally on their side. Over 10 countries' armies had already gathered at the foot of the Kunlun Mountains, and over 200 extraordinary warriors had also rushed to the Kunlun Mountains one after another. A tremendous pressure gathered in the sky above the Kunlun Mountains. The gazes of everyone in the world were gathered here, waiting for Fang Xinjian to make his decision. However, other than the White Army itself, probably no one in the entire world thought highly of them. Just then, a news report was suddenly broadcasted on the television, attracting the attention of Jessica's family. This is the breaking news report. According to the latest news from the front lines, the White Army's new commander, Fang Xinjian, has given his response to the joint trial. He says. Saying this, the news host seemed to be stunned for a moment. She blinked as if she did not dare to believe what she had just read. A short while later, she gulped and continued, "Fang Xinjian says that within 3 hours, the 9 armies must all merge into the White Army. Otherwise, he'll bathe the heaven-connecting tower in blood and kill all those who resist." When everyone heard this news, they felt as if a bomb had exploded in their head. They felt that Fang Xinjian had gone crazy. This lunatic, does he want to plunge the entire planet into war? Jessica's father slumped on the sofa. His eyes were lifeless and his mind was blank. In the heaven-connecting tower, the king of trepidation laughed out loud. "You've got guts. You've really got guts. Which one of you would have expected this guy to respond like this?" His eyes were filled with great excitement. Once an all-out war broke out, the Yellow Army's chance would come. The conflicts between the 13 armies had been going on for a long time. Even though it was 9 against 1 right now, once they really started fighting, all sorts of conflicts would definitely erupt. If a few of their mortal enemies were to sneak up on them, it might develop into a chaotic battle. At the thought of this, the king of trepidation's body trembled with excitement. On the other hand, Hui He's countenance darkened abruptly, and he was burning with fury. Arrogant! He's too arrogant! Who does he think he is? It could be said that Fang Xinjian's reply had caused Hui He to completely miscalculate this time around. He had only wanted to join forces with the majority of the armies to attack a small group of people, relying on the 9 armies' influence to force Fang Xinjian to submit. In his plans, there was no such thing as a war breaking out. After all, once a war broke out, it would be a state of chaos. After all, there were 9 leaders in the 9 armies, and it would be a big problem as to who would listen to whom. The entire situation was in danger of going out of control. This was something the Grey Army, which had always wanted to control the world and hoped that society would operate according to their rules, would never allow. The 7 commanders sat together at a huge circular conference table. Unlike Hui He's fury and the King of Trepidation's excitement, a Caucasian lady wearing a purple qipao appeared very relaxed. The light purple qipao wrapped around her body, bringing out her voluptuous figure. The 2 supple mounds before her chest were almost about to pop out, making one wonder if the qipao's quality was good enough. The slit below her waist revealed her pair of long and slender legs. A layer of exquisite black stockings wrapped around her legs, appearing extremely sexy. This lady who was filled with allure was the Purple Army's commander, Ling. She smiled and said, "I feel that this Fang Xinjian is quite manly. Don't you guys think so?" Hui He's countenance darkened further. However, although he had miscalculated with regards to Fang Xinjian, Hui He felt that they still held an absolute advantage, and the situation had not changed in any way. Therefore, he said solemnly, "This isn't the time to joke around. That Fang Xinjian has killed people from my army and violated the 1-3 agreement. Since he can kill my people, he can also kill yours. Moreover, you guys have also seen his strength. Which one of you would dare to say that you'll definitely win against him in a one-on-one fight? This means that he even has the chance to kill existences at the level of commander." Hearing Hui He's words, everyone's hearts skipped a beat. They thought of the powerful strength that Fang Xinjian had displayed during the live broadcast. Hui He continued, "Earth may seem peaceful right now, but we all know that there are endless dangers hidden behind this. That person is constantly eyeing this planet, and our powers mustn't be wasted on internal strife. However, after Fang Xinjian has started this, if we don't punish him severely and stop him immediately, the consequences will be unimaginable. It might even lead to the end of the world. Everyone here won't have it easy either." A bald old monk in orange monk robes put his palms together and said with a sigh, "Amitabha. It's true that these are troubled times. If we don't suppress Fang Xinjian, this person will probably stir up the world and bring calamity to the mortal world. However, his strength is extremely astonishing. We'll need to join forces if we wish to punish him," Hui He emphasized. Based on the Gold Army's calculations, the power that he instantly unleashed when he exchanged blows with Grade and me is 3 times the power that I can unleash at the highest level. Let's say that this isn't his full power. A young man with blood-red hair that looked like burning flames smiled coldly and said, "This isn't his full power?" He shook his head in disbelief. "He's not a god. He's just a human. How is it possible?" This was clearly the Red Army's commander. "Underestimate the enemy," Hui He said as he looked at the young man. "This is a battle that concerns the world's safety. Shouldn't we be cautious and estimate the other party's strength based on the worst-case scenario? Once we fail in this encirclement, you can imagine what the situation on Earth will be like." The King of Trepidation thought, due to the requirements of their temperaments, the 13 armies can't see eye to eye with each other. There's no unity at all. If it wasn't because of that person's external threat, they'd probably have started fighting a long time ago. Once the encirclement fails, they'll probably do things their own way for the sake of self-preservation, and everything will be in chaos. This is suitable for our Yellow Army to spread terror and increase our strength tremendously. We might even surpass all the other commanders." A middle-aged man wearing a blue uniform frowned and looked at the empty seats at the conference table. He said, "Where are Grade and Kaosi? Why aren't they here yet?" let's ignore them for now. He continued to talk about his arrangement. For now, let's assume that Fang Xinjian's strength is over 5 times that of mine. If we wish to defeat him, we mustn't fight him one-on-one. We must use our abilities to coordinate with each other. It's best not to let him unleash his battle prowess. Otherwise, even if we win, Earth's environment will be severely damaged. As he said this, he gradually regained his confidence. We won't give him a chance to engage in an all-out battle, nor will we give him a chance to fight head-on. We'll make use of the few of our abilities to coordinate and kill Fang Xinjian directly. As for the remaining warriors from the White Army, there's no need to fear them. Everyone nodded. Even if Fang Xinjian really possessed 5 times the strength of He, they would be able to kill him completely with their abilities working together. He looked at everyone solemnly and said, "Everyone should understand the severity of the problem now. If we can unite and coordinate with each other, then there's no need to worry about Fang Xinjian. However, if one of us harbors disloyalty and causes this battle to fail, then the entire Earth might welcome chaos, and he'll become the sinner of all humanity." As he said this, his gaze turned toward the King of Trepidation and the red-haired young man, causing the two of them to feel uneasy. The middle-aged man wearing a blue uniform suddenly stood up and said, "Enemy attack." At the next moment, a white light pillar descended from the sky. Under everyone's astonished gazes, it encompassed the area within a range of 10 lis. In the blink of an eye, the entire heaven-connecting pagoda was completely vaporized. Chapter 933. The light pillar that descended from the sky instantly vaporized everything within a range of 10 lis. When the white light gradually disappeared, only a stretch of scorched land was left behind. On the flat land, there were no longer any physical existences beyond the horizon. The entire land was like a piece of black cloth that had been ironed. As for the Grey Army's headquarters, the world's tallest heaven-connecting tower, not a single strand of hair was left behind. Concurrently, Jessica stood in void space with the Panway sword in her hand. She wore a solemn expression as she bellowed coldly, "Let me remind everyone that you still have 2 hours to decide if you want to surrender or not." Everything within a range of 10 lis had been vaporized. However, the 7 commanders had used all sorts of means to survive. Red, blue, orange, and other colors of light encompassed their bodies, allowing them to float in midair. Looking at the scorched land before him and hearing Jessica's threats, he was infuriated. His mind was filled with fury. "Tch, you're courting death." With an explosive bellow, he slapped out with his palm, and gray energy turned into a stretch of huge mountain that pressed down fiercely toward Jessica. The huge mountain that was formed in the blink of an eye expanded rapidly under the gray energy. Very soon, it covered up the sky and turned into a huge shadow. One could faintly see that the layers of mountain ranges seemed to be the shadows of the Kunlun Mountains, Alps, Heavenly Mountains, Kilimanjaro, and other mountain ranges on Earth. It was as if all the mountain ranges on the entire planet were connected together and came crashing down explosively. With a single attack, strong gales seethed, and magnetic forces interacted with the ground under Hui's feet, unleashing a world-shaking prowess. Hui had been so infuriated that he had performed his ultimate move right from the start. In terms of the prowess of this move, although it was not comparable to the Domination Fist and Zero Seal that he had performed in the past, its range of attack and prowess far surpassed that of the Domination Fist and Zero Seal. It gave off a shocking feeling as if there was nowhere to hide in the world. If he were to encounter an ordinary opponent, they would probably be overwhelmed by this aura and crushed into dust before they could react. They would not be able to unleash even 30% of their battle prowess. Although Hui was enraged, he still maintained a hint of calmness and used this move against a rookie like Jessica. However, faced with the descending mountain shadow that blotted out the sky, Jessica remained calm. She slashed out toward the sky with the Panway sword, and a stream of sword chi that was about 1,000 meters wide soared into the sky. It slashed out fiercely toward the mountain shadow in the sky like a reverse galactic river. Rumbling sounds rang out as the sword chi collided with the shadow of the mountain. In an instant, soil and stone fragments flew everywhere. Countless mountains were torn apart and shattered, and debris fell down. With just one strike, the huge mountain in the sky was split into two. The sword chi continued forward, disappearing into the horizon. The mountain shadow that was split into two seemed to be able to hold on for a few seconds before it gradually collapsed, turning into countless fragments that fell to the ground. It was like a myriad of meteors hitting the ground, causing the earth to tremble and sand to fly up. The terrain changed greatly, leaving behind a large undulating hill and a large pit. At the sight of this scene, the countenances of all the commanders turned solemn as they stared at the Panway sword in Jessica's hand. Their faces were filled with curiosity, puzzlement, and solemnity. After Jessica slashed out with her sword, she did not stop. She turned into a stream of sword light and flew out, disappearing from everyone's vision in the blink of an eye. Huihe's eyes narrowed, and the fury on his face disappeared completely. Instead, his eyes were filled with coldness, revealing endless calmness. "You guys sensed it, right?" A hint of scorching light flashed in the red-haired young man's eyes. "Didn't you notice it back at the hall?" This red-haired young man was the Red Army's leader, Akaryu Jushur. Huihe shook his head and said, "I originally thought that the sword was formed from Fang Xinjian's powers, just like how we use our rings to transmit our powers across a distance of 1,000 lis. But by the looks of it now..." Earlier at the hall, he had clearly not sensed any connection between Jessica and the longsword. All the powers had been unleashed by the longsword itself. However, during the few exchanges earlier, he had clearly sensed that the white energy in Jessica's body kept on stimulating the longsword, unleashing astonishing sword chis. By the looks of it, the longsword was not formed from Fang Xinjian's powers. Instead, it was clearly some kind of powerful weapon. The old monk dressed in orange monk robes said slowly, "This Jessica is merely a small soldier who has just joined the White Army for a few days. Yet, she's able to use the ring's energy to stimulate the longsword's sword chis and unleash such a prowess. Does anyone know of the origins of this sword?" This old monk was the Orange Army's commander, Monk Huife. He had been a monk to begin with. It was because the orange ring required the user to have the resolve to sacrifice themselves for the sake of others. It had too high a demand on the user's character. His influence and strength had always been on par with the White Army's. However, he was a true eminent monk and could unleash the orange ring's powers very well. Hearing Huifei's question, Ling chuckled and said, "A few days ago, the White Army, Silver Army, and our Purple Army each had a ring go missing. It was a resonance of emotions and they automatically chose their owners. This Fang Xinjian has never been mentioned before. It's as if he had popped out from a rock. Moreover, this divine sword also appeared suddenly, and there's no way to tell where it came from. Come to think of it, what Fang Xinjian displayed wasn't the ring's energy either, right? A man who wore a pair of frameless glasses and a suit, looking like a successful person, pushed up his glasses and said, 'You're saying that this Fang Xinjian is the person whom the ring automatically acknowledged as its owner? Since he suddenly appeared, it's possible that he's not a native of this planet, and that he was the one who brought this weapon?' This man, who was dressed like a successful person, appeared to be the most normal person amongst the 7 people present. However, he was actually the Green Army's leader, the Ming King. Who cares? Akaryu Jushuru, whose red hair was fluttering in the wind, said fiercely, "Let's snatch that sword first. This sword's prowess is extraordinary. If we use it, it'll be like adding wings to a tiger. If you guys don't want it, then I'll take it first." With that, he squatted down slightly. Even though he was stepping on void space, it was as if he had really stepped on something. A soft bang rang out under his feet, and as air currents rose up under his feet, he darted out abruptly, disappearing almost in the blink of an eye. This was the Red Ring's unique ability, unbounded leap. The Red Army's mental state was one of supremacy. They disregarded all external rules, etiquette, and even objective reality. Everything was based on what they thought in their hearts, and they only wished for a single thought to be clear. This sort of requirement could be said to be the easiest to get started with. However, it was also easy to learn but hard to master. After all, it was very easy to bully the weak and be selfish. However, when faced with existences that were stronger than them, when faced with the movements of the entire world, when faced with their family and friends, as well as the entanglements of gratitude and grudges, they had to be able to cut through the Gordian knot. Not everyone would be able to do this. As long as one's mental state and will were sufficient, the unbounded leap would be able to ignore all obstacles between the user and the target. The Red Army's leader, Akaryu Jushuru, was the most outstanding among them. Chapter 934. With this leap, Akaryu Jushuru was clearly chasing after Jessica. The others exchanged a glance and instantly turned into 6 streams of light, giving chase in the direction where Jessica had disappeared. He sighed inwardly. He knew that Fang Xinjian had taken the initiative to display such a divine sword, causing a rift to appear between them. However, this was an overt plot, and he was unable to stop it. After all, after seeing this sword's prowess, even he felt a burning desire in his heart. If there was a chance, he would definitely want to get his hands on this divine sword. But do you think that you'll be able to increase your chances of winning by stirring up a conflict? He smiled coldly inwardly. It's just that you went for wool and came home shorn. On the other side, Akaryu Jushuru instantly traversed several thousand kilometers and punched out. His fiery red fist instantly imprinted on Jessica's back. With a rumble, sword light flashed explosively at the critical moment, blocking this punch. However, Jessica was still sent tumbling and crashing into a stretch of desert. Sand and dust splattered everywhere, and a stretch of sand dune was formed. Jessica let out a stifled snort and sensed that a part of the skin on her back had been completely destroyed. Her back was now a bloody mess. Akaryu Jushuru had ignored the obstruction between the two of them with the unbounded leap. He had even disregarded the protection of the sword light and struck her back. If it was not because the sword light had automatically protected her under her skin after failing to protect her, Jessica would not have just had her skin destroyed. She would have been killed by this punch. It's a divine sword as expected. Akaryu Jushuru landed on a sand dune with a bang. He looked coldly at Jessica and said, "Hand over the divine sword, and I'll leave your corpse in one piece." Just as the 7 commanders were chasing after Jessica, Fang Xinjian, who was in the sacred white crevice, seemed to be deep in thought. With a flick of his finger, 2 streams of sword light shot out from his fingertips. They turned into 2 silver longswords and flew toward Priest Longmai and Priest Tai. They were Fang Xinjian's Thunder Calamity sword and Abyss sword. Seeing the 2 swords flying out, both Priest Longmai's and Priest Tai's eyes lit up. They looked at the swords with fascinated expressions. They had long been envious of Jessica's prowess with the Panwei Queen. However, Fang Xinjian instructed, "Jessica is under siege. The 2 of you take a sword each and go help her." Understood. Fang Xinjian nodded slightly as he watched the 2 of them retreat with their swords. Not long after they left, a beam of sword light slashed out from the void. It was the white bone sword that the immortal child had possessed. The longsword trembled and transformed into the immortal child's appearance. "Isn't this plan too risky? Each of your 3 divine swords is famous throughout the ages and possess the power to split the heavens and the earth. If you lose them, it doesn't matter. This sword has already become one with me. Others can forget about taking it away." Fang Xinjian said, "Immortal child, it's all thanks to your discovery this time around. Otherwise, if we hadn't sensed anything, we might really have been taken over by that person. This person's strength isn't lower than Tier 6 of the divine level, and he also possesses the special powers of this world. He has already merged with spacetime, and just the mention of his name will be able to sense it. The immortal child sighed. I didn't expect that there would be such a character in this small world. It was true that the size of Earth was much smaller compared to Miracle World. Fang Xinjian muttered to himself for a moment before saying, however, that person's remarkable abilities are too powerful. Just this level of preparation alone is still not enough. The two of us will join forces to clear the trial. We'll be bound together for good or bad. When the time comes, I'll naturally release the White Emperor Zenith Sword, and Brother Fang can use it to kill that person, the immortal child said. Thankfully, this world's cultivation history is still short, and that person doesn't have the sudden inspiration ability. The first attack of the White Emperor Zenith Sword will definitely be able to catch him off guard. Fang Xinjian nodded. The history of extraordinary powers in this world was still too short, and the various aspects of their power system were naturally not as complete as Knight's martial arts. Fang Xinjian and the immortal child's real target was that person who was hiding in the dark. To them, regardless of whether it was Hui He or Long Mai, they were merely chess pieces at most. Elsewhere, in the desert, Sword Chi's soared into the sky. Akaryu Jushuru flashed at rapid speed, also using unbounded leap to circle around Jessica and attack to and fro. Each time they came into contact, a large amount of blood would splatter. His unbounded leap could be said to be unstoppable, and one could only receive it head-on with one's physical body. Even with sword light protecting one's body, the outermost layer of one's skin would be wiped off before one could instantly defend against it. Almost in the blink of an eye, Jessica's body was covered in blood. At the sight of this scene, Akaryu Jushuru became even more excited. He licked his blood-red lips and said, "Woman, I can't even be considered a warm-up right now. How much longer can you hold on for?" Jessica bit her lip and did not say a word. She merely tightened her grip on the Panwei sword and slashed out once again. Sword light soared into the sky, slashing out toward Akaryu Jushuru. However, it was pierced through by Akaryu Jushuru's unbounded leap, and blood splattered out once again on Jessica's shoulder. Clearly, with Jessica's experience and cultivation, she was unable to unleash the Panwei sword's full prowess. She was even being slightly restrained by Akaryu Jushuru. A short moment later, Hui He and the others also arrived. They stood in the sky, surrounding Jessica from all directions. As they watched Akaryu Jushuru put up a desperate fight against Jessica, their gazes revealed all sorts of scheming thoughts. In their opinion, Jessica was already at the end of her rope, and the fight for the divine sword would follow. Just then, another two streams of sword light came attacking down from the sky. They were Priest Longmai and Priest Tai. Ling chuckled and said, "Everyone, let's attack together." At this moment, with Priest Longmai and Priest Tai's reinforcements, the battle instantly entered a white-hot state. However, despite having the help of the divine sword, the three experts from the White Army were unable to unleash the divine sword's true prowess. Jessica had also suffered from serious injuries a long time ago and did not have much battle prowess left. On the contrary, the 7 commanders cooperated well and complemented each other with their abilities, causing the 3 of them to be pushed back repeatedly. Over 10 minutes later, Jessica let out an agonizing cry. Akaryu Jushuru snatched away the Panwei sword. He looked at the long sword in his hand excitedly, feeling as if his entire body was filled with endless power. Priest Longmai frowned, and the thunder calamity in his hand slashed out toward Akaryu Jushuru. However, the thunder calamity, which could cut through and slash through everything, was blocked by the Panwei sword. Just as he was distracted, Hui He made a brazen move. The world abides to the heart was activated, instantly restraining Akaryu Jushuru. With Hui He's current serious injuries, he could only maintain this restraint for an instant. However, It was already sufficient for the many commanders present. At this instant, the Yellow Army's commander, the King of Trepidation, and the Green Army's commander, Ming Wang, made their moves concurrently. Endless spiritual chi of trepidation burst out, and an identical green thunder calamity sword appeared in Ming Wang's hand. In the sacred white crevice, Fang Shijian's gaze suddenly lit up, and he said calmly, "It's done. Then I'll set off right away." As he spoke, he stood up slowly. The 12 pages of the Book of Wisdom next to him slowly closed up and were placed into his divine country. The immortal child said, "Brother Fang, don't worry. They still don't know of my existence. When the time comes, I'll provide assistance from the dark and release the White Emperor Zenith sword to assist you at the crucial moment." Fang Xinjian nodded, took a step forward, and disappeared completely. Chapter 935. In the desert, the King of Trepidation's attack sent spiritual chi of trepidation gushing out toward Priest Longmai with an overwhelming force. The extremely dense feelings of trepidation gathered together, as if they had formed many material demonic shadows. Trepidation was a living creature's instinct. It hid in the hearts of living creatures, constantly teaching them respect and helping them to avoid natural dangers. Trepidation helped humans avoid danger and survive in the natural world. However, excessive trepidation would cause humans to be unable to move forward and lose the courage to overcome difficulties. Trepidation is a reverence toward the world, an instinct of all living creatures. Under the heavenly law, who can escape from it? The King of Trepidation opened up his hand, and the spiritual chi turned into a huge demonic shadow, wanting to engulf Priest Longmai. Such intense spiritual chi of trepidation could bring out the hint of trepidation in anyone's heart, turning the iron-blooded general into a cowardly person. Once the spiritual chi of trepidation spread out wantonly, it would be enough to scare an entire city of commoners into idiots. At the instant the demonic shadow engulfed Priest Longmai, the green longsword in the hands of the Green Army's commander, the Abyss Lord, also arrived. The Green Army grasped the ability to replicate, and they could replicate anything they had seen before. This naturally included the Thunder Calamity sword in Priest Longmai's hand. However, when the replicated sword pierced out, Ming Wang's countenance changed. He sensed that the energy depletion of this replicated sword had far surpassed his estimation. Even with the energy reserves in his ring, he could only sustain it for over 10 seconds. However, this made him even more determined to get his hands on this sword. The green replicated Thunder Calamity sword pierced out into the air, breaking through the layers of demonic shadows. The King of Trepidation bellowed furiously, "Ming Wang, you're courting death!" However, Ming Wang did not care and continued to pierce out with his longsword, turning into streams of cold light that encompassed Priest Longmai. However, Priest Longmai was in a difficult situation. He had been besieged to begin with, and his powers were greatly depleted. Now that Zi Ling and the King of Trepidation had taken the opportunity to attack his heart with secret arts, his mind and will were shaken violently. It became increasingly difficult for him to fend off Ming Wang's attack. Man Tai wanted to provide assistance, but he was also besieged by Hui He, Zi Ling, and the others. With Jessica's defeat, the remaining Longmai and Man Tai were unable to hold on for long. The Thunder Calamity sword and the Abyss sword were taken by Ming Wang and Reverend Fahui respectively. With that, the Red Army's commander Akaryu Jushru obtained the Panwei sword, the Green Army's commander Ming Wang obtained the Thunder Calamity sword, and the Orange Army's commander Reverend Fahui obtained the Abyss sword. As for Hui He, Zi Ling, the King of Trepidation, and the others, they had gained nothing. After snatching the 3 divine swords, Jessica and the rest were about to risk their lives to snatch the swords back when they heard Fang Xinjian's voice. After a moment of hesitation, they immediately flew into the sky. Throughout the entire process, no one stopped them. It was because the 7-colored army's commanders had already focused their attention on the 3 divine swords. Ever since Akaryu Jushuru snatched away the Panway sword, he had been standing in void space, holding onto the sword with both hands. His will seemed to be communicating with the Panway sword incessantly. Streams of fiery red ring energy kept on wrapping out toward the longsword, seeming to be communicating with the energy in the sword. The power contained in the Panway sword far surpassed his previous estimation. When he entered it with his will, it was as if he had entered a world of swords. All sorts of sword light flashed to and fro within it, and he could sense endless profoundness and knowledge hidden within. That woman is too weak and unable to unleash the true prowess of this divine sword. Now that this sword is in my hands, it's like adding wings to a tiger. Akaryu Jushuru was overjoyed and thought, with the help of this sword, I might be able to reach the heavens in a single bound and truly reach the pinnacle. Or even surpass that person. Seeing that the battle had ended and the 3 people from the White Army had fled, a hint of disdain flashed in Akaryu Jushuru's heart. Then he saw the gazes of Hui-He and the others looking over. He held the Panway sword and swung it in the air. A myriad of sword light shot out explosively, plowing through the desert within a range of 1,000 meters and instantly vaporizing several million tons of sand. A lofty feeling of being unstoppable and no one in the world could contend against this rose in Akaryu Jushuru's heart. Coupled with the fact that he was from the Red Army to begin with and that he was the only one in the world, this feeling suited his character even more. Even the ring's energy surged a little. It's really a good divine equipment. Seeing the grim and astonished expressions of Hui-He and the others, Akaryu Jushuru felt even more delighted. He said coldly, the White Army has been defeated, and the dragon Vane has fled. Aren't you guys going to give chase? Hearing Akaryu Jushuru's words, the middle-aged man in blue uniform stepped forward. He was the Blue Army's leader, Bruce. Looking at Akaryu Jushuru and the divine swords in his hands, Bruce said directly, Everyone, these 3 divine swords have a mysterious background and possess great prowess. That Feng Xinjian might even be a visitor from beyond the heavens. These 3 swords mustn't be used lightly. We should seal them up and study them in detail. We'll only consider whether we should use them after making sure that there's no harm done to them. That's right. The King of Trepidation glared at the Green Army's Ming Wang and the Thunder Calamity sword in his hand. He said coldly, this weapon is strange. It's better to keep it first. Otherwise, you might fall into Feng Xinjian's trap. Despite saying this, Akaryu Jushuru, who had obtained the sword, could sense the great power and knowledge contained within it. Therefore, how could he be willing to let it go so easily? Ming Wang smiled and said, I've already checked this sword. It hasn't been tampered with. I can already control the power within it like it's my own arm, and there's nothing abnormal about it. Akaryu Jushuru did not stand on ceremony when he spoke. I was the one who snatched this sword. If any of you want it, you can come and snatch it yourself. As he spoke, he darted out and disappeared. He had activated the unbounded leap and left directly. Clearly, after obtaining this Panway sword, he was not willing to get involved in any more battles. Instead, he wanted to find a quiet place to comprehend the profoundness within the sword by himself so that he could attain another breakthrough. As Akaryu Jushuru leaped away, Ming Wang chuckled. It was unknown when his body had started to slowly dissipate, but he had only left behind a clone. His real body had long since retreated. At the sight of this scene, the atmosphere instantly turned cold. A dangerous gleam flashed in the King of Trepidation's eyes. Clearly, he was furious that he had not managed to get his hands on a single divine sword. Amit Ba. Just then, Reverend Fahué, who was dressed in orange monk robes, stepped forward and said, If everyone is willing, you can study this divine sword together with me. Although this sword contains great power, its origins are mysterious. It also has an unclear relationship with that Feng Xinjian. We mustn't ignore it. Chapter 936. The Orange Army required the members to have a heart of dedication and sacrifice. Therefore, Fahui could be said to be the most selfless person present. He and the others immediately agreed with this suggestion. Fahui tossed the abyss sword into midair. In that instant, the 5 experts immediately split out a portion of their powers and gushed out toward the longsword. With this, the ring's energy and the powers in the divine sword interacted, and the 5 people present immediately sensed the powerful powers. Complicated expressions appeared in the eyes of He and the King of Trepidation. This power must be in my hands. The same thought rose in the 2 of their minds. Just then, a stream of sword light tore through void space and arrived at the scene. It was a man with fluttering black hair and a long white robe casually draped over his body, faintly revealing his lean body. However, the most eye-catching thing was the man's pair of eyes that were like black gemstones. They were like black holes in the universe, constantly emitting a fatal attraction force as if they wanted to suck one's soul into them. Almost at the instant Fang Xinjian appeared, he caught everyone's attention. Even the few commanders, who had high cultivations, were stunned for a moment before they managed to break free from this attraction force. Hints of surprise flashed in Ziling's eyes. Who are you? What power was that earlier? This feeling of being attracted and being noticed was too similar to the Purple Army's love ability. However, Fang Xinjian smiled, looked at the 5 commanders and said, "The 5 of you snatched my sword, but you still don't know who I am?" The King of Trepidation's countenance changed. "You're Fang Xinjian?" The other 4 also fiercely raised the energy in their rings, and the 5 of them all had their auras explode, like 5 small suns flying in the air. He said directly, "Reverend Fahui, I'll have to trouble you to take control of this divine sword first. This way, you'll be able to unleash your full power when the battle breaks out later on." Hearing that, the others' expressions changed slightly, but they did not object. They knew that he was right. Out of the 5 people present, the others would probably not be at ease if they took control of the divine sword. They might even plot against the sword wielder during the battle. Only the Orange Legion used sacrifice and dedication as a condition to be selected. Reverend Fahui's temperament was also the greatest guarantee that he would not covet the divine sword. Fahui nodded and took back the abyss sword without hesitation. He said, "Fang Xinjian, you indiscriminately killed members of the army, endangered Earth's safety, and attempted to start a world war. However, you're the White Army's commander after all, an expert. It's not too late for you to admit your guilt and repent now." Of course, he did not really want to reconcile with Fang Xinjian. It was just that the divine sword's powers and origins were too mysterious, and the divine sword came from the White Army. Therefore, before he could get a clear understanding of the divine sword's background, he still wanted to drag things out. It would be best if he could only take action after they had completely grasped the divine sword's profoundness and gotten a clear understanding of Fang Xinjian's background. A strange gleam flashed in the King of Trepidation's eyes as he said, "That's right. Fang Xinjian, armies are like brothers. Although you've gone a little overboard, it's not impossible to salvage the situation. As long as you're willing to lower your head and admit your mistakes, we might be able to forgive you and even return this sword to you. During the period where you admit your guilt and repent, this sword is too dangerous. It's better for us to take care of it for you." The others did not object. They merely looked at Fang Xinjian with scrutinizing gazes, as if waiting for his reply. After all, there were 5 commanders present, and each of them had amazing abilities. Although they were wary of Fang Xinjian, they would not really be afraid of him. However, Fang Xinjian clearly would not wait for them. A hint of a brutal smile broke out on his face as he said calmly, "Are you done?" "You." He still wanted to say something. Rumble. As Fang Xinjian's figure moved slightly, it was as if the clouds in the sky had split apart. The atmosphere within a range of 1,000 li seethed, and a heavy pressure came gushing forth. It almost caused everyone present to feel suffocated, and they wore astonished expressions. At the next moment, Fang Xinjian tapped out with a finger, and an invisible power seemed to shrink into a single point in that instant, pressing down on Hui He's body. It was as if a finger was crushing an ant to death. With this tap from Fang Xinjian, Hui He's body instantly exploded, turning into a cloud of blood fog. As an agonizing cry rang out, Hui He, who had lost his physical body, turned into a lump of pure gray energy, forming a blurry image of himself. Right now, his physical body had been destroyed, and he would only be able to use the gray energy to carry his will in the future. Although he did not die from this, the destruction of his physical body caused him to lose all the happiness that his physical body could obtain in the future. Moreover, he had used his physical body for several decades and entrusted many of his feelings to it. This caused him to be extremely infuriated. However, at the next moment, Fang Xinjian's actions were like a basin of cold water, completely extinguishing his fury. It was because Fang Xinjian tapped out a second time. Rumble, rumble, rumble. The atmosphere tore apart and explosions rang out in the sky. As the air was compressed by a force, an invisible vacuum seemed to reveal the appearance of a finger, tapping out toward the King of Trepidation's head. Roar! Seeing this finger tap out, the King of Trepidation let out an explosive bellow, and a myriad of demonic shadows rose up behind him, colliding toward the finger. Simultaneously, Zi-Ling, Bruce, and Fahui also made a move simultaneously. 3 streams of purple, blue, and orange light burst out. Together with the Abyss longsword, they smashed out toward the finger force that descended from the sky. However, when the 2 gushes of powers collided, the trio's combined forces were instantly torn into dust. The King of Trepidation's myriad of demonic shadows also turned into nothingness amidst a series of agonizing cries. The finger force did not stop at all. It pressed down on the King of Trepidation's body, causing his body to explode into a lump of flesh and blood. Then it continued pressing down into the desert and stirring up endless sand. How is this possible? At the sight of this scene, there was no longer any fury in Hui He's mind. He watched as the King of Trepidation was pressed down onto the ground like he was crushing a mosquito. Even though Hui He no longer had a physical body, he still broke out in cold sweat. Run! Run quickly! This person's powers far surpass our imagination. We'll need to gather all the army's powers to defeat him. Everyone, split up and escape. At the next moment, 5 streams of light cut across the sky, flying out in 5 different directions. At the sight of this scene, Fang Xinjian smiled. Taking a step forward, he disappeared once again. In the sky above a certain well-known peninsula in the Mediterranean Sea, countless tourists were partying on the beach. Beauties in bikinis were either applying sunscreen or basking in the sun, reading magazines or playing volleyball. They kept on displaying their youthful vigor and alluring postures. Just then, a stream of blue light pierced through the sky and collided into the beach with a rumble. It cut out a ravine that was several hundred meters long and sent sand and dust splattering all over the place. Countless people looked at this scene with their eyes and mouths agape. Some people screamed and ran away, while others mustered up their courage and looked toward the place where the blue light had landed. They saw that the Blue Army's commander, Bruce, was being grabbed by the head by a black-haired and black-eyed man. Chapter 937. In the television broadcasting studio, a huge number was counting down with each passing second, affecting the nerves of countless people across the globe. This was the 3-hour countdown that the television station had set up after Fang Xinjian had given his reply. Over an hour ago, an unknown explosion had occurred in the northernmost continent. The entire heaven-connecting tower had turned into nothingness, and the land within a range of 100 lis had been scorched. Over half an hour ago, a battle had taken place in the desert of Central Asia, and it was suspected that there were commanders fighting. Reports regarding these two pieces of news filled up the entire world, attracting the attention of countless people. It was a pity that no one from the military or the armies were able to provide any more information. The media could only keep on trying to investigate the entire matter through their own channels. The host in the broadcasting studio said, "Right now, there's only half an hour left to the time limit that Fang Xinjian mentioned. However, there's still no new information from the armies. However, what we can be sure of is that the White Army has already started fighting with the other 9 armies. However, other than a few explosions, there's no other news. It's so quiet that it's a little strange." He then turned to look at Professor Lorton and asked, "Professor, what do you think of the current situation? The White Army is a part of the 13 armies after all. As the commander, it's impossible for Fang Xinjian to be killed so easily," Professor Lorton said with certainty. Professor Lorton said with certainty, "The explosion at the beginning must have been caused by Fang Xinjian attacking the heaven-connecting pagoda first. However, he was then pursued by the 9 commanders. The reason why there's no news is that Fang Xinjian has gone into hiding, and the 9 commanders are pursuing him. Since there's no battle, there's naturally no news." The host nodded, but at the next moment, his countenance changed. He pressed down on the earpiece next to his ear, as if he was listening to something. He lifted his head abruptly, pointed at the camera, and said, "Everyone, our frontline reporters have received the latest information. They've discovered traces of Fang Xinjian on the Mediterranean Sea's Golden Beach. It seems that he's fighting with the other commanders." Professor Lorton said agitatedly, "He must have been captured by the other commanders. To think that even ordinary people have discovered his tracks. The battle must have been decided." The host nodded and said, "The reporters in front are rushing there. Let's take a look at the photos posted by the local passers-by on the internet. These are pictures taken by witnesses." As he spoke, a picture appeared on the big screen. It was a picture of Fang Xinjian standing on the beach, holding Bruce's head in one hand and lifting him into the air. Everyone gasped when they saw the photo in front of them. "That's Bruce, the Blue Army's commander. I can't believe he's being carried like this. Who is that man? Is it Fang Xinjian?" The host was also surprised and said in disbelief, "Based on the news from the scene, the man who was lifted up is the Blue Army's commander, Bruce, and the black-haired man is the White Army's commander, Fang Xinjian. According to the witnesses, Fang Xinjian left after beating Bruce up and destroying his body." As Fang Xinjian spoke, the pictures kept on jumping, and a series of pictures were displayed one after another. The content of the pictures was the scene of Fang Xinjian smashing Bruce's body with a punch and a kick. Even though such an explosive scene had been censored, it still instantly caused a great commotion. On the internet, countless and censored versions of the photos were being broadcasted crazily. The host looked at Professor Lorton and said, "Professor, what do you think of the current situation? Did Fang Xinjian kill Bruce? Where are the other commanders? What on earth has happened?" Lorton looked at the pictures on the big screen in a daze. His tone was filled with confusion. I also. However, the host did not wait for him to finish his words. He pressed down on his earphones and stood up agitatedly once again. "What? Everyone, the latest news is that Fang Xinjian has appeared in Eastern Europe again. Let's take a look at the footage from the scene." In the blink of an eye, the image changed and turned into a blurry shot. It seemed to have been taken by a mobile phone and was slightly shaky. There were also all sorts of exclamations and screams coming from the image. In the image, it could be clearly seen that two figures were constantly colliding and chasing each other in the sky. From time to time, they would land on the ground, causing the ground to tremble. Countless buildings collapsed and explosions rose up. Looking at the scene before them, everyone in the live-streaming room wore solemn and respectful expressions. When they saw this kind of power that humans could not resist at all, there was a hint of fear in their eyes. Looking at the crowd that kept screaming and running away in the image, they felt a sense of sympathy for the death of a rabbit. At the next moment, two streams of light and shadows rushed in the direction of the cameraman. Amidst the screams, the entire image shook violently. It was as if the cameraman was jumping around continuously. It was only when a loud sound rang out that the image gradually stabilized. Under the cameraman's control, the camera slowly moved toward a stretch of ruins. It was a ruin with only bricks and tiles all over the ground. The entire house seemed to have been buried. Just then, a loud sound rang out, and countless rubble and rubble were pushed away. A monk wearing orange robes walked out from the ruins. Chapter 938. In Jessica's home in North America. Jessica's father was watching the TV with a nervous look on his face. From time to time, he would search the internet for the latest news about the army commanders. It was a pity that ever since the explosion in the extreme north and the battle in the desert, there had been no more news. Jessica's younger brother continued, "It's over, it's over. With the 9 commanders ganging up on him, this Fang Xinjian is dead for sure. However, we're going to be implicated as well. What's going on?" The countenance of Jessica's father became even more grim. He had not expected that the army's reaction would be so intense this time around. Even the 9 commanders were pressuring Fang Xinjian. Moreover, he had not expected that Fang Xinjian would be so unyielding as well, daring to take the initiative to attack. Just then, the sound of footsteps rang out. The family of 3 turned and saw that Jessica had unknowingly appeared in the room. She had rushed over to rescue her parent. After all, although she did not know what Fang Xinjian's goal was, she knew that there would probably be a series of battles. Therefore, she was afraid that her parents would be implicated, which was why she had come over to bring them away. Jessica's father exclaimed, "Jessica!" Jessica's younger brother and mother also looked over, but her younger brother said furiously, "You still have the cheek to come over? Do you know that you've gotten us into trouble? Dad's decades of hard work has been ruined by you in just a few days. Right now, all of our family's assets are going to be confiscated." Jessica frowned and ignored her younger brother. She looked at her father and said, "Dad, pack up and come with me now." Her father hesitated for a moment, not saying a word. Jessica's younger brother objected, "We can't leave. Us leaving with you now? Are you asking us to send ourselves to our deaths? Fang Xinjian is being hunted down, and the White Army won't be able to hold on for much longer either. Yet you still want us to follow you?" Jessica threw a cold glance at her younger brother, not saying a word. She looked at her father and said, "Dad, I don't have much time. Leave with me quickly. As for Lord Fang Xinjian, it's impossible for him to lose to anyone else." Jessica's father still didn't answer. He just frowned and sighed, "Jessica, I really can't take this risk." He didn't have high hopes for Fang Xinjian at all. As for what his daughter said, he felt that it was a form of blind worship. Looking at her father, a hint of disappointment flashed in Jessica's eyes. However, the white energy in her body became even denser, and a feeling of apathy and a stronger desire to pursue the path appeared in her heart. At this moment, the host's exclamation came from the television. Then, there was a series of images and reports of Fang Xinjian hunting down the commanders all over the world. Jessica's parents and younger brother were all dumbfounded. Jessica's father sat down on the sofa and suddenly stood up. He looked at Jessica's original seat, but it was already empty. Only Jessica's faint voice could be heard. "The other legions are intimidated by Lord Fang Xinjian's reputation, so they probably won't make things difficult for you. However, I'm afraid that there will be a series of battles coming up. You guys should hide well." At this moment, a strong desire to pursue the path of Tao suddenly rose in Jessica. She felt that worldly emotions were so weak and meaningless, and the white energy in her body became increasingly denser. Looking at the disappearing Jessica, Jessica's father opened his mouth wide, and his eyes revealed great regret. Sigh, I was wrong. I've really made the wrong choice this time around. However, at the next moment, his expression turned resolute. But Jessica is my daughter after all. I'll head to the Kunlun mountain right now. Even if I have to squeeze, I'll squeeze into the sacred white crevice. Grade! A young man glared at the Black Army's commander, Grade, and let out a venomous cry. However, at the next moment, his head was completely engulfed by black energy, and he disappeared. Grade sensed waves of pink ring energy seething to and fro in his body, and he revealed a hint of satisfaction. However, this hint of satisfaction disappeared completely very soon, and the greed in his eyes grew even stronger. Earlier, he had completely engulfed the Pink Army's commander. The reason why the two of them had not reached the heaven-connecting pagoda was because Grade had launched a sneak attack on them on the way. After eliminating the engulfing ghost and gaining complete control over all of the Black Ring's energy, Grade's strength was increasing at a rapid rate with every passing moment. After engulfing the Pink Army's commander, his strength increased explosively once again. Grade raised his hand and looked at the pink ring on his index finger, revealing a hint of surprise. It's still not enough. He licked his lips and looked toward the sky. I need more. I want all of the powers of the other 12 armies. As long as I can gather all of the ring's energies from the remaining armies, I'll be able to merge good and evil, gather the powers of the 13 demonic gods, and become a unique existence in the world. At that time, even that person won't be a match for a single attack from me. The entire world will be in my hand. At the thought of this, the greed in Grade's heart grew even more exuberant. He was like a wolf that had been starving for 3 days, unable to wait to engulf all of the commanders. 3 hours later, the news of Fang Xinjian hunting down the commanders spread throughout the entire world in the blink of an eye. When Grade heard this news, his eyes lit up. The heavens are on my side. The heavens are really on my side. Their flesh is being crushed, and the ring's energies are being depleted incessantly. This is a good opportunity for me to display my abilities. It's really a heaven-sent opportunity. At the thought of this, Grade turned into a burst of black light and searched for the commander's locations. Over 10 minutes later, Grade soon found the location of a target by relying on the special communication method between the armies. In a stretch of forest in South America, Ling looked at Grade with an expression of great fear and trepidation on her face. It's too terrifying. This Fang Xinjian is really too terrifying. You won't be able to imagine how amazing he is. Moreover, he isn't using the powers of the White Ring. He's definitely a visitor from beyond the heavens and not someone from our world. Right now, Ling's physical body had also exploded. She was formed from the purple ring's energy, but she was also floating and seemed like she would break down at any moment. Looking at Ling, Grade slowly moved closer to her and revealed a concerned expression. He said, "It's all right. When the time comes, we'll join forces and call Edward along. Then we'll have 10 commanders working together. Will we still have to be afraid that we won't be able to defeat him?" Ling's body trembled, but at the next moment, she shook her head. "It's not enough, not enough. We must get that person to come out. Other than him, there's probably no one else on Earth who's a match for Fang Xinjian. You don't understand at all. You haven't really fought against him before. It's only after fighting against him that you'll understand that he's not something that humans can deal with." Hints of terror were planted in her heart by Fang Xinjian. Right now, they kept on sprouting, causing her to be in a daze. Regardless of whether it was her battle prowess, battle will, or wariness, all of them had dropped to the lowest point. It was at this extremely rare moment that Ling's countenance changed, and she bellowed furiously, "What are you doing?" Purple light burst out, but countless streams of black energy came gushing forth, as if wanting to encompass and corrupt her completely. "You idiot! Our real enemy is Fang Xinjian. He's the greatest enemy that all of us face." Grade smiled. "Don't worry. After I eat you guys up, I'll eat him up as well. Idiot, you'll regret this. Although Zi Ling had put up a resistance, she had been defeated by Fang Xinjian multiple times, and feelings of terror had been planted in her heart. Her ring's energy and will had both deteriorated severely. Right now, she was unable to break free from Grade's attacks and could only watch as her body was gradually covered up by darkness. Unknowingly, another purple ring had appeared on Grade's hand. Chapter 939. Right now, other than the black ring, Grade also had pink and purple rings on him. He had obtained the powers of 3 armies, and his abilities could be said to have increased tremendously once again. However, this was far from being able to satisfy his appetite. With a flash of black light, he once again flew up into the sky, heading in the direction of another commander. In a huge group of temples in the south of Central Asia, orange light soared into the sky like a heavenly pillar connecting the sky and the earth. This temple was the Orange Army's headquarters, the Holy Light Temple. The heavenly pillar in the temple stood tall in the world for 24 hours a day, emitting majestic orange energy and illuminating the land within a range of 100 lis. Every year, there would be Orange Army's warriors coming out from the heavenly pillar after reviving. Right now, a human figure was slowly taking form in the light pillar. His flesh, bones, nerves, and other body tissues were reconstructed one after another, eventually forming Reverend Fahue's appearance. Earlier on, he had activated his powers and the Abyss Sword's powers to carry out a suicidal attack. However, right now, he came back to life unscathed. Even the Abyss Sword in his hand was unscathed and was still being held in his hand. This was the Orange Army's ability, sacrifice. As long as one sacrificed themselves for others and did not have any selfish or utilitarian thoughts in their minds, they would be able to perform such an attack. They would self-detonate all of their bodies and will, completely dedicating their powers to kill the enemy. Then they would revive amidst the eternal orange light. However, the prerequisite was that they did not have any selfish thoughts and were fully devoted to dedicating and sacrificing themselves. This was clearly very difficult to achieve, and even Reverend Fahue did not dare to guarantee that he would be able to do this every single time. Therefore, he would not use this move easily. However, Reverend Fahue, who had just stepped out from the heavenly pillar and completed his rebirth, did not show any hint of joy on his face. Instead, he looked even more miserable. "Master, what on earth happened?" A young monk surrounded by orange light flew into the sky and asked Reverend Fahue. Reverend Fahue shook his head, and the orange ring emitted a series of waves that radiated out toward the entire earth like electromagnetic waves. The radiation emitted by the ring's energy was transformed into a special communication channel. However, even after waiting for a long time, there was still no response. Reverend Fahue's countenance turned even more grim. It was only 10 minutes later that Grade's exasperated voice was transmitted through the ring's energy. "Damn it, it's all that Fang Xinjian's fault. He killed everyone else. Zi Ling, Kaosi, and the others are all dead," Grade said in an anxious tone. "What should we do?" At the same time, Fang Xinjian gripped the neck of the Blue Army's commander, Bruce, tightly with one hand. He watched as Bruce's body became increasingly dimmer due to Fang Xinjian's corruption, and a blue ring was slowly taking shape on his hand. How could this be? Although we suffered a great loss before, we relied on the power of the ring to regroup, so no one died. "I don't know," Grade shouted. "That Fang Xinjian's battle prowess seems to have increased. This can't do. I feel that he has found me. At the next moment, Grade's voice was cut off by Reverend Fahue, and Reverend Fahue's countenance turned even more grim. "No, I can't go on like this." At the thought of this, Grade brought along a stream of orange light and soared up into the sky. He paused for a moment, got his bearings, and with a dash, he disappeared into the ends of the sky. Even with so many of us joining forces, we aren't a match for Fang Xinjian. At this moment, We can no longer hold back. We must inform him immediately, simultaneously. His will kept on scanning the abyss sword. Perhaps these 3 divine swords also contain the secret to defeating him. At the moment when Fa Hui disappeared, Fang Xinjian stood at the spot where he had been standing, quietly looking in the direction in which Fa Hui had left. He's heading in this direction to seek the Gold Army's assistance. Fang Xinjian's eyes flashed with an inexplicable glow, as if there were countless pieces of information flashing in them. The other 2 seemed to be studying my swords, wanting to obtain more power from them. This will make it easier for me to perform my heart sword path. The immortal child's soft laugh rang out in Fang Xinjian's mind. There's also a little guy who seems to have gone out of control. Don't we need to care about him? Fang Xinjian shook his head. There must be some variables. However, they haven't thought of looking for that person even at this point. It seems that I'll have to put in more effort. Let's chase out the 2 little guys who are hiding first. On the other side, in outer space, within a huge universe space station, the Gold Army's commander, Edward, looked at the latest information with some surprise. I didn't expect that this Fang Xinjian would be able to do this. Interesting. A subordinate's voice rang out in his ears. Sir, they're coming over. Edward's gaze swept across the huge full-length glass window and saw that in outer space, a total of 4 streams of light, gray, yellow, orange, and black, were charging over and slowly stopping outside his space station. Edward, he said. You should already be aware of the situation. Right now, Fang Xinjian's prowess is overwhelming and he's wreaking havoc across the entire planet. We must join forces in order to subdue him. Grade stood behind the 3 of them, hiding the blue, pink, and purple rings in his body. The powers of the 4 armies kept on seething in his body, causing hints of greed to appear in the depths of his eyes. He almost had an irresistible urge to immediately eat up the 3 commanders before him, as well as Edward, who was in the space station. Wait a little more. Just wait a little more. Not interested. Edward shook his head and gave his answer. My time is limited. No matter what he wants to do, as long as it doesn't affect me, I'm not interested in bothering about it. Hearing Edward's words, the countenances of he and the others changed. It was only then that they recalled that the people of the Gold Army were more concerned about the search for the truth. As for other things like Earth's safety, the changes in countries, and the reshuffling of power, they did not care as long as they did not affect their desire for knowledge. He said, do you think that he'll stand by and watch after defeating us? Ling, Kaosi, and Bruce have all been killed by him. After we're killed by him as well, no one will be able to help you. When the nest is overturned, no eggs can remain intact. Don't you understand such a simple logic? Edward shrugged and said, then I'll just submit to him. As long as I can continue with my research, it's nothing even if I submit to another commander. Hearing that, everyone was stunned, as if they had not expected that Edward would do this. Chapter 940. It was only at this moment that they realized that Fang Hui did not care about things like authority, influence, or wealth. What he wanted was merely to continue his research and to continue pursuing the truth. However, regardless of whether it was he or the King of Trepidation, one of them found it hard to accept that he was being controlled by others, while the other did not allow himself to fear others. As for Grade, he wanted to engulf Fang Xinjian and all the other commanders. Reverend Fa Hui was also unable to accept Fang Xinjian massacring the army's warriors. Therefore, it was impossible for the 4 of them to submit to Fang Xinjian. However, Edward did not have such an obstacle. The few of them tried to persuade him again, but Edward had no intention of changing his mind. Just then, Fa Hui took out the abyss sword and said, this divine sword was obtained from Fang Xinjian and contains the profoundness of the world. If you're willing to join forces with us to defeat Fang Xinjian, we can let you study this sword. Hearing his words, the countenances of both the King of Trepidation and Grade turned grim, and they almost stepped out to stop him. However, he revealed a hint of determination and said, "Edward, if you don't believe us, you can feel free to check out this longsword. We definitely won't stop you." There was not much information regarding the Abyss Sword in the information Edward had obtained previously. However, after hearing the duo's introduction, he felt a little curious. At the next moment, countless probing devices inside and outside the space station aimed at the Abyss Sword in Fahue's hand, immediately attracting Edward's attention. Unknown metal and this molecular structure. Is it man-made? Such strong radiation and magnetic flux. To think that there's an unknown space inside? Interesting. Edward's calm gaze, which seemed as if there was nothing that could attract his attention, suddenly lit up. He looked at the Abyss Sword and said, "You guys are saying that this was obtained from Fang Xinjian?" "That's right." He immediately shared what they knew and added, "The remaining 2 swords have been taken away by Ming Wang and Akaryu Jushru respectively. Right now, both of them are in hiding and studying the profoundness of this sword." The King of Trepidation continued, "Edward, if you're not willing to help, then we can only consider releasing those 2 fellows." Hearing the King of Trepidation's words, everyone's countenances changed. Even Edward, who had been calm all this while, frowned and said, "Are you threatening me?" The King of Trepidation shrugged. "We can't just sit here and wait for our deaths, watching as Fang Xinjian kills us one by one." Of course, he didn't really want to do that. He just wanted to use these words to threaten Edward. However, his words seemed to be very effective. As he spoke, the entrance to the space station slowly opened. Edward continued to communicate with the ring's energy. "Come in." On Earth, in a stretch of wilderness in North America, Akaryu Jushru stayed in a fortification that was 12 kilometers underground. Streams of crimson light appeared on his body, wrapping around the light pursuit's sword like many threads. Countless energies and knowledge surged incessantly between the 2 of them, helping him to explore the profoundness of the light pursuit's sword. Truly amazing! Not only does this sword possess terrifying energy, but the profoundness it contains isn't inferior to even the Book of Wisdom. As long as I'm given a few more months, I'll definitely be able to surpass everyone and reach a level that no one has been able to reach since ancient times. Fang Xinjian must have relied on this divine sword to become so strong. With my aptitude, however, at that moment, the entire underground base trembled. Akaryu Jushru frowned and thought to himself, "This secret base was specially built by me alone over a few years. I didn't tell anyone about my visit this time around." Just as he was thinking of this, the steel door that was 10 meters away was suddenly sent flying, and Fang Xinjian walked in unhurriedly. "You're late." A hint of confidence flashed on Akaryu Jushru's face. "I've already comprehended the secret behind your great power." Right now, before Akaryu Jushru could finish his words, Fang Xinjian had already appeared before him. Fang Xinjian kicked him in the chest at a speed that surpassed his senses. Rumble! Akaryu Jushru's physical body was instantly crushed into dust, and he dashed out toward the ceiling of the secret room together with the light pursuit sword. He was like a crimson meteor, instantly passing through several tens of layers of steel plates, cement, and concrete before dashing up into the sky. Having his physical body smashed up with a single kick, Akaryu Jushru was completely overwhelmed with astonishment. He did not dare to resist in the slightest. He let out a sharp cry and controlled the red energy, disappearing into the sky with an unbounded leap. Fang Xinjian looked at Akaryu Jushru, who had fled without even turning back. Fang Xinjian smiled and disappeared without a trace. In the space station, Edward was using all sorts of means to gather information from the Abyss Sword. The more he looked at it, the more astonished he became. Regardless of whether it was its strength, density, molecular atomic structure, or other standards, all of them far surpassed his understanding. The information contained within the sword and the knowledge within the information made him feel even more engrossed. Just as he and the others were anxiously waiting for Edward's reply, the Green Army's Ming Wang and the Red Army's Akaryu Jushuru had both fled into the space station. Right now, both Ming Wang and Akaryu Jushuru had their physical bodies smashed up by Fang Xinjian. They could only use their ring's energies to maintain a physical form. Fortunately, the two divine swords were still under their control. After a series of questions and answers, they found out that the two of them had also been attacked by Fang Xinjian. At this moment, a hint of graveness finally flashed in Edward's eyes. Fang Xinjian. He was able to find you guys and defeat you with a single move. However, you guys were able to escape all the way here. As Edward spoke, the entire space station started moving, and over 10 scouting devices were released in all directions. He reacted very quickly as well. You're saying that he chased us all the way here? No, Edward said calmly. It's just that since he was able to find Akaryu Jushuru and Ming Wang, he'll naturally be able to find us as well. As they spoke, the alarm rang out and many screens lit up, displaying the void space over 10 kilometers away from the space station. Fang Xinjian was standing there, looking in the direction of the space station. A chill rose in everyone's hearts, and he said bitterly, "He's here." At the next second, a strong sense of danger rose in their hearts. They saw Fang Xinjian lift a finger and point in their direction. Chapter 941. Dodge quickly. Edward's countenance changed, and he turned into a stream of golden light, piercing through the outer shell of the space station and darting into outer space. The other commanders also performed their abilities and fled in all directions. Almost at the instant they left the space station, a stream of sword light shot out explosively from Fang Xinjian's fingertip. It expanded rapidly in the blink of an eye, turning into a light pillar with a diameter of over several hundred meters. It traversed across the vacuum, completely encompassing the space station and vaporizing it completely. Fahui Huihe, King of Trepidation, Grade, Ming Wang, Akaryu Jushuru and Edward. A total of 7 commanders were gathered here. Other than the Silver and Cyan commanders, who had yet to appear, Fang Xinjian had already met all the commanders of the 13 armies. Looking at Fang Xinjian, Edward said, "Fang Xinjian, we finally meet." His entire body flashed with golden light like the most dazzling heart in the night sky. Amidst the distorted light, there seemed to be countless characters and numbers jumping about, giving off an endless mysterious feeling. Edward continued, "Is there really no chance for us to reconcile? You're also the White Army's commander. You might not know this, but this planet is shrouded by even more terrifying dangers other than us. We shouldn't be killing each other." Looking at Edward, Fang Xinjian's heart skipped a beat. To think that he has the strength of a Tier 5 divine level expert. Moreover, his will has reached the microscopic level and is already comparable to the heavenly Wolf Kings. It was not easy for him to be able to reach this level in this world where the cultivation civilization was lower than Miracle World. It's a pity that since you're standing in my way, I can only kill you. Fang Xinjian's thoughts raced at lightning speed. Without replying to Edward's question, Fang Xinjian raised his hand, and a myriad of sword light scattered out, charging out toward the 7 of them like a meteor shower. Damn it! He can't be bothered to reconcile with us. A hint of fury flashed on the faces of the 7 commanders. Fang Xinjian's contempt or even disregard had trampled on all of their pride. However, in the face of the overwhelming sword light, they could only use their own techniques to evade at the first moment. Among them, Edward was the most relaxed. With a slight movement, he distorted space and took a single step forward, covering a distance of over 10 kilometers to arrive before Fang Xinjian. Then, with a slash of his sword fingers from top to bottom, the condensed light radiated and turned into a light sword with a temperature of several tens of thousands of degrees Celsius, slashing down toward Fang Xinjian. Not bad. Fang Xinjian allowed the sword of light to strike his chest. It rubbed against his chest, split apart, crumbled, and finally turned into specks of starlight. Fang Xinjian said calmly, "To be able to reach this stage in this world, your talent can be considered quite good. However, it is still meaningless." As Fang Xinjian said these words, his body was gradually encompassed by a layer of silver. He turned into an existence that was like a metal man, perfectly reflecting all the light and shadows in the surroundings. Heaven-piercing upper extremity sword physique activated. Just as Fang Xinjian finished saying these words, Edward continued to attack. Golden light flashed on his fingertips, and two gushes of power, one real and one fake, were suddenly formed. "Take my antimatter explosion." At the next moment, the two gushes of power merged into one on his fingertips, and a violent explosion instantly covered up Fang Xinjian's body completely. High temperatures radiated out in all directions. Although there was no air or impact waves in outer space, the antimatter explosion from this attack could still kill most Tier 5 divine-level experts. However, under Edward's astonished gaze, Fang Xinjian stood where he was without any injuries after the explosion dissipated. "You!" Edward's gaze narrowed, and he probed out toward Fang Xinjian's body. However, he was instantly entranced by what he saw. In his senses, no matter how he magnified and delved in, he was unable to see any particle structure in Fang Xinjian's body. It was as if he would forever be a single entity. After understanding what this meant, the calmness and indifference on Edward's face disappeared for the first time. He finally understood what a great mistake he had made. To think that I didn't pay any attention to a monster like this. A hint of regret flashed on Edward's face, and he let out a sigh. He turned into a lump of golden light and hugged Fang Xinjian. "Oh? You want to self-destruct? It's meaningless." Scorching golden light burst out from Edward's body, and all of the ring's energy started to materialize a tremendous amount of matter and antimatter. Edward grinned, and a hint of regret flashed in his eyes. "It's a pity that I won't be able to see your defeat." At the instant the two of them clashed, the other 6 commanders were forced to flee crazily by a series of sword light. This continued until a piercing golden light came encompassing down from the horizon. One side of the entire Earth was encompassed by that golden light, bringing this side of the Earth from night to day. Over 1 billion people looked at the abnormality in the sky in astonishment. It was only after 5 minutes that the golden light gradually disappeared. The remaining 6 commanders had already fled in all directions. The final message that Edward had transmitted to them was still ringing out in their minds. "Release Silver and Green. They're the only ones who can kill this monster." The 6 of them fled on their own, occasionally communicating through the ring's energy waves. About an hour later, the 6 of them gathered on the moon's surface. "What should we do?" He asked, feeling a little unwilling to accept this. "Do we really have to look for Silver and Green?" A hint of horror flashed in the King of Trepidation's eyes, and those 2 terrifying figures once again appeared in his mind. Out of everyone present, he was probably the one who feared those 2 the most. It was because the 2 of them harbored ill intentions toward him. No, the King of Trepidation was the first to object. "If we release them, the entire Earth will be destroyed." Akaryu Jushur held onto the light pursuit sword and said, "They won't destroy Earth, but they might destroy you. You're opposed to releasing them because you're afraid of this, right?" The King of Trepidation said furiously, "Akaryu Jushuru, don't speak as if you're not afraid. If we release them, you'll never be able to carry out your intentions. You'll never be able to progress." Akaryu Jushuru merely smiled coldly. "If we release them, we'll just be suppressed. If we don't release them, we'll die. You've seen it for yourself. That Fang Xinjian wants our lives." He shook his head and said, "But it's too dangerous to release them. These 2 guys can't be controlled at all. Half of us might die the moment they come out." The Green Army's Ming Wang looked at the Thunder Calamity sword in his hand and said slowly, But if we don't release them, we'll all die. Fang Xinjian's powers have completely surpassed our level. You've seen it for yourself. Even Edward is helpless against him. We can't release them, Grade said furiously. If we release them, we'll never have peace. Do you guys still want to return to that terrifying era? Everyone's countenances stiffened as if they had recalled something. Fahui stabbed the abyss sword into the ground and said, "Then let's just think of ways to send them out. We were able to do it previously, and we can do it this time around as well. After all, their opponents are only themselves." Just as the 6 of them were arguing, an orange light suddenly appeared before them. It was Edward, who should have self-detonated and died earlier. Faced with the 6 of them who were on guard, Edward raised the orange ring in his hand. The ring's energy shone out, turning into waves and starting to talk to the 6 of them. "Don't be nervous. I'm a clone prepared by the previous owner. After the previous owner dies, I'll be activated," Edward said. "We don't have time to argue. We must release the 2 of them immediately. Only they can kill Fang Xinjian. After we kill Fang Xinjian, we can still think of ways to seal the 2 of them again. After all, they won't rest until one of them is dead. This is something we can make use of." Seeing the orange energy on Edward's body, the 6 of them temporarily let down their guard. No matter what, the ring's energy could not be faked. After hearing Edward's words, the 6 of them sank into silence. Chapter 942. Earth, Sacred White Crevice. Fang Xinjian held onto a page of the Book of Wisdom, and was reading it with great interest. The immortal child sat at the side, holding onto a cup of tea. Just as he was about to drink it, he suddenly smiled. "It has finally been decided. Those 7 people have already set off, but I didn't expect that person to be so far away from this planet." "Saturn?" Fang Xinjian also silently raised his head and looked in the direction of the starry sky. "With their speed, it'll take them 1.5 years to make a round trip. It'll be enough for us to make ample preparations." Everything that Fang Xinjian and the immortal child had set up and done previously was to deal with that commander who had not been on Earth all this while. It was also an existence that gave them an endless sense of danger from their sudden inspiration senses. They understood that the test of this checkpoint rested on the Legion commander. Based on their investigations and the information that the immortal child had obtained after delving deep into countless confidential files, the 2 strongest commanders on Earth had never appeared before others. One of them was from the Silver Army, while the other was from the Cyan Army. Moreover, all the warriors from the 2 armies had never appeared before. According to the other armies, they were guarding some checkpoint and fending off enemies from beyond the starry sky. Even the immortal child had not been able to find out where they had gone. It was only when the 7 commanders had secretly set off for Saturn that they found out that the other party was in such a faraway place. Clearly, this was a secret that only these few commanders knew about. The Cyan Army advocates chaos and loves war. They oppose order, society, and even humanity. They were the common enemy of most of the armies, Fang Xinjian said. Fang Xinjian said, "The Silver Army advocates justice and loves to uphold justice. They are existences that can kill commanders for the sake of a commoner. They often meddle in the affairs of other armies, and most of the commanders do not like them. The Silver Army and the Cyan Army are archenemies to begin with. Now, it seems that these 2 armies are guarding Saturn. I wonder what the situation is like there." The immortal child nodded. "It seems that the person we sensed is either the Cyan or Silver Army." He recalled the first time he received information about the other party. When his mind began to ponder over the other party's information, the pair of eyes that looked at him from the void. With just a glance, he had shattered 30% of his martial will. From then on, Fang Xinjian knew that this person's cultivation was equivalent to having broken through to Tier 6 of the divine level. Fang Xinjian was able to connect with space, and even become one with it. Fang Xinjian could even sense when others mentioned or thought of his name. Therefore, he and Fang Xinjian had always referred to each other by their colors. The immortal child continued, however, according to these 7 people, they seem to have found a way to keep the 2 of them on Saturn, but I don't know how they did it. I'm afraid they're taking advantage of the conflict between the 2 sides, or perhaps there really are external enemies that they need to defend against. Fang Xinjian said, in any case, now that the chess pieces have been laid, all we need to do is wait for them to fall into the trap. It just so happens that Saturn is far away, so I can make some preparations. As Fang Xinjian spoke, many pages of the Book of Wisdom floated out. Right now, Fang Xinjian had already analyzed most of the White Army's Book of Wisdom. The microscopic knowledge and the profoundness of space-time contained in it were a very good supplement to what he had learned in the past. However, when the immortal child saw the single page of the Book of Wisdom, his countenance turned bitter. Although he was also a Tier 5 divine level expert and had an extremely strong understanding toward nature, the universe, and the microscopic world, he had not come into contact with Earth's scientific system, nor had he used too many mathematical tools. To him, rather than analyzing the contents of the Book of Wisdom, he might as well use that primitive method to directly observe and summarize the laws of the natural world. Therefore, the immortal child smiled and said, "Forget about this Book of Wisdom. After you've analyzed it, just send it to me through information current." At the next moment, he disappeared with a flash. Fang Xinjian shook his head and looked at the page in his hand, revealing a contemplative expression. This time around, he had 3 great goals for clearing the tribulations: perfecting the instant sword, perfecting the newly created heart sword path, and perfecting the divine country. During the past few days of research, he had already made some progress. Firstly, there was a lot of knowledge in the Book of Wisdom that was extremely helpful to him in perfecting the instant sword. Therefore, he wanted to continue collecting the other single pages of the Book of Wisdom. Secondly, regarding the perfecting of the heart sword path, Fang Xinjian's method was set on the 13 armies. These armies used their temperaments and wills to activate the energy in the rings, allowing Fang Xinjian to gain a lot of inspiration during this period of time. As for the construction of the divine country, Fang Xinjian had even more bold plans. In any case, I'll get someone to collect the Book of Wisdom first. With a single thought, a stream of information currents was sent out from Fang Xinjian's side to Priest Longmai's side. That night, the armies were defeated, and the news of all the commanders going missing spread throughout Earth. Priest Longmai took action personally, using his commander-level powers to wipe out the Despair Mountain Range, Holy Light Temple, and the other armies' headquarters. The White Army also took the entire planet by storm. However, just such violence alone was unable to make everyone submit to them. This was especially so for many ambitious people. After the 10 commanders either died or went missing, they started to appear one after another. The separatist influences in various places were densely packed like the stars in the sky. Countless people rose up in revolt, clearly wanting to take this opportunity to proclaim themselves as kings. A total of over 100 general-level characters from the various armies started to stand up for themselves, and the few strong countries were wavering and extremely ambiguous. It was as if they also wanted to take this opportunity to break free from the army's control. The entire Earth seemed to be sinking into chaos. Although this was the case, many people were using the name of rebelling against the White Army. However, no one really attacked the White Army. The so-called name was just a name. Most of them were just hiding behind the scenes, getting some small fries to come out and wave flags and shout battle cries to test the White Army. Are all of them trying to sound out our intentions? Fang Xinjian asked, propping up his chin. That's right, Priest Longmai said. Sir, it's better to wipe out all those who resist with thunderous means. Otherwise, a single spark can start a prairie fire. However, Fang Xinjian shook his head. It doesn't matter. I'm not interested in ruling over Earth. You can just manage it yourself. As for those people who want to become independent, there's no need to care about them as long as they hand over the Book of Wisdom." Priest Long Mai was stunned for a moment. However, out of respect for Fang Xinjian, he agreed without any objections. Therefore, over the next few weeks, countless influences handed over the contents of the Book of Wisdom that they had collected, or the ones that the armies had collected previously. However, while there were those who were willing to submit, there were also those who resisted. Chapter 943. A few days later, in South Africa, Fang Xinjian stood on a stretch of plains, looked at the military camp in the distance, and said, "It's them?" Priest Long Mai said, "This is the military camp of N country's First Army. The ruler of this independent country is called." "There's no need to tell me in so much detail." Fang Xinjian waved his hand, stopping Priest Long Mai from explaining further. Fang Xinjian was not interested in the identity of this independent country's ruler, whether he was a dictator, what was the reason for not handing over the Book of Wisdom, whether there were any conspirators behind this, and which influences were adding fuel to the fire to test his attitude. He merely clenched his fist and raised it toward the sky. In that instant, countless atmospheric and white clouds gathered above the military camp, turning into a huge fist that was several kilometers long. Then, as Fang Xinjian's fist pressed down, the power seethed in the sky, and strong gales gushed forth. Countless warriors cried out in astonishment as they lifted their heads to look, watching as the entire sky came pressing down explosively. There were cries of astonishment, cries, prayers, and all sorts of sounds of bullets and rockets being shot toward the sky. Countless sounds were mixed together, and it was like the clamor of hell. In the end, all the clamor turned into a series of dull collisions, and everything returned to silence. The cities within a range of several thousand kilometers all felt an intense tremor. Countless houses within a range of 500 kilometers collapsed, and countless animals cried out agonizingly as they fell into the cracks in the ground. Countless mountains collapsed, and the earth shattered. The entire military camp also disappeared from the ground, leaving behind a huge crack that was over 100 kilometers long and several tens of kilometers wide. It was like an extremely hideous scar, showing off the prowess of that earlier attack. "Let's go." After doing all these, Fang Xinjian turned and disappeared. It was as if he had just gently flicked away the bugs on his body. Priest Long Mai looked at this scene in astonishment, unable to calm down for a very long time. He felt even more admiration for Fang Xinjian's cultivation. The news of Fang Xinjian's attack was also spread out very quickly. His vicious means very quickly shocked all the ambitious people, and the various large organizations handed over the Book of Wisdom, allowing Fang Xinjian to obtain 2,303 pages of the Book of Wisdom in one go. This even included the single page that had been kept in secret and was not in the discovery sequence. After obtaining so many books of wisdom, Fang Xinjian could not wait and started to analyze them. At the same time, his main body continued to stay within the sun, using the thunder-inducing technique to keep on strengthening his martial will. Time passed by day. About half a year later, there were still endless disputes on Earth due to the division between the Army's influences and the White Army's inaction. Countless kilometers away from Earth, on the distant sixth planet of the solar system, a group of uninvited guests was welcoming them. The seven-colored light converged into one, turning into a seven-colored disk that slowly descended. What welcomed the disk was the gales on the surface of Saturn moving at an average speed of 500 meters per second and the ultra-low temperature of -170 degrees Celsius. The elements in the atmosphere were mainly hydrogen and helium, and a large number of floating ammonia crystals formed dense yellow clouds. This caused Saturn's surface to look like there were many golden ribbons. Strong gales that surpassed the speed of sound struck the disk like countless sharp swords. However, they were still unable to do anything to this seven-colored disk. It was because this disk was formed from the combined powers of the seven commanders' rings. It was constantly being maintained by their wills and the ring's energies, and it had even helped them cross the distant starry sky and arrive on Saturn. It could be said to be a manifestation of the seven commanders' abilities. Within the disk, Edward and the other 6 commanders stood together, revealing hints of fatigue on their faces. Even they were almost at their limits after crossing over 1 billion kilometers without bringing any resources and moving purely on the ring's energies. After all, even though the ring's energies would recover every day, there was a limit to a person's will. Looking at the tempest on Saturn, the king of trepidation sighed, and there was an indescribable nervousness in his eyes. I really didn't expect that I would be able to come here in my lifetime. Everyone fell silent. None of them had expected that the king of trepidation would return here and release those 2 monsters. Edward did not say anything. With a flash of golden light, a golden screen materialized, and a tremendous amount of data and a map kept on jumping on it. Let's go. I hope that their location hasn't changed too much. At the next moment, the 7-colored disk sank slightly and broke through the strong gales, flying toward the depths of Saturn. In the blink of an eye, it passed through a distance of 1,000 kilometers, broke through the atmosphere, and crashed into an ocean that was formed from liquid hydrogen and liquid helium. There were no signs of life in the ice-cold seawater. It was rare for a batch of intelligent life forms to appear in this ocean that had been alone for several billion years. As Edward and the others continued to get closer to their destination, the temperature of the seawater also became increasingly cold. Occasionally, pieces of floating ice would collide against the disk, shattering into countless ice shards and scattering out into the vast ocean. As the temperature continued to drop, the volume of the ice shards became increasingly larger. Gradually, icebergs that were over 100 meters in length started to collide against the 7-colored disk, but they were shattered into dregs. In the depths of this ice-cold and lonely ocean, as the temperature continued to drop, an ice-sealed battlefield could be seen floating slowly. It was a huge battlefield that spanned over several 10,000 square kilometers. It was also an extremely vast land of ice plains. There were over 100 warriors scattered across the battlefield. However, all of them had turned into ice sculptures, standing quietly in this ice-cold ocean of hydrogen and helium. They were either launching punches, dodging, or defending. Their actions were lively, and their auras were majestic. It was as if they were still in the midst of battle, able to move at any moment. It could be seen that these warriors had been split into 2 groups and were attacking each other. They were the Silver Army and the Cyan Army that had fought here back then. The battle between these 2 groups could sink the land and destroy the ecosystem. The Cyan Army did not care about this, but the other armies were unable to accept this. Therefore, they joined forces and lured the Cyan Army to Saturn. However, other than the Cyan Army, the Silver Army was also the target of everyone's ceiling. Amit Ba. Reverend Fahue looked at the Silver Army's warriors who had been frozen along the way, and a bitter expression appeared on his face. Although these warriors were strong enough, after being sealed in ice for so many years, both their physical bodies and wills had died a long time ago. The Cyan Army's warriors were just a bunch of lunatics, and their deaths were not to be regretted. However, each and every one of the Silver Army's warriors had righteousness in their hearts, serving the country. They could be called heroes. Although their ideals were different, Reverend Fahue still felt that it was a great pity for them to die. Flying across the ice-cold land, the 7 of them headed toward the center of the battlefield. The 7-colored disk landed slowly on this stretch of frozen land. At the next moment, it suddenly shattered and dissipated, revealing Edward and the other 6 figures. Chapter 944. It's up ahead, Edward said with a grim countenance. I hope everything goes smoothly. Over 10 years ago, as the 2 strongest influences on Earth, the Cyan Army and the Silver Army had a decisive battle here. The other 11 armies wanted to take this opportunity to wipe out the two armies in one fell swoop, completely removing them from Earth. They had succeeded and also failed. They had made the two armies disappear from Earth for over 10 years and dismembered all the mortal forces the two armies had on Earth. However, they had not really succeeded either. It was because neither the Cyan Army's leader nor the Silver Army's leader had really died back then. They had merely been trapped. The King of Trepidation's eyelids trembled a little, and the yellow energy encompassing him seemed to flicker a little. As the King of Trepidation and the leader of the Yellow Army, he felt an irrepressible terror gushing out from his heart. Are we really going to let him out? Shouldn't we reconsider? Ziling was killed by Feng Xinjian. Until now, we still haven't thought of a way to seal them up again. Everyone else present could understand the King of Trepidation's worries. It was because, out of the 7 commanders, his relationship with Silver was the worst. After all, his concept of spreading terror was completely at odds with Silver's justice. However, now that things had come to this, what else could they do? They had spent half a year to come to Saturn. What they had lost was not just time. Right now, they could imagine that all of their businesses on Earth had probably been broken up. For example, the King of Trepidation needed to spread terror to raise his strength, while he needed to control influences and society to fulfill the requirements of his sexual orientation. All of them felt that their powers were deteriorating. The ring's energies that they could control were getting increasingly lesser by the day. From the moment they decided to come to Saturn, there was no way out for them. The 7 of them walked on the ice land, and the 7 colored rings' energies encompassed their bodies, forming many battle suits that protected them from the extremely low temperature in the surroundings. After walking for about 300 meters or so, they arrived before a huge ice mountain. The mountain's height was over 10,000 meters. If it were on Earth, it would be the New World's highest peak. Based on Edward's and the others' memories, Cyan and Silver had been sealed in ice in this mountain. Over 10 years ago, the two of them had fought in Saturn's ocean of hydrogen and helium. At the most crucial moment of that battle, the other 11 commanders had taken action together. They had not intended to kill the two of them, but had used the power of the purple spirit as a base to make the two of them fall in love with each other. Using the power of the 11 commanders as the foundation, with the purple spirit's power as the main attack, taking advantage of the fact that the two of them were holding each other back, they broke into the spiritual world of the two. In the minds of Edward and the others, the two of them represented complete opposite. Once they fell in love, there would be a conflict between their temperaments, and it was very likely that the energy of their rings would be destroyed. Unfortunately, Silver's cultivation was beyond the imagination of Edward and the others. At the last moment, he sealed his emotions in ice. While he was freezing his emotions, Qing took the opportunity to attack him and seal all of his desires. The two of them attacked each other on the mental level. Silver's emotions and desires were sealed, and as the emotions in his heart were sealed one by one, in order to stop Qing from dragging him out, he turned the area within a radius of several hundred kilometers into frost, sealing him, Qing, and the two armies together. The two of them attacked each other. No matter how disadvantaged they were, they did not forget to dig holes for each other. The result could be said to be mutual destruction. However, such seals were actually very weak. Once they were stimulated by the outside world, they would be awakened very quickly. Therefore, all these years, they had avoided mentioning Silver's and Qing's names in order to prevent them from awakening. The reason they had come to Saturn was to help Silver suppress Qing during the process of unsealing. After all, if they had to free one person, they naturally hoped that it would be Silver who could communicate with them. After all, Qing's chaos and chaos made it impossible for him to communicate. He was a pure lunatic. Edward looked at the huge ice mountain and said, "Get ready. Let's attack into Silver's spiritual world together and help him suppress Qing's attack." They were evenly matched to begin with, and our participation is like the last straw. Everyone held their breaths, and streams of Ring's energies rose up, bringing along a portion of their wills and darting toward the depths of the ice mountain. However, just as they were about to do this, everyone's actions suddenly came to a stop. The 7 of them looked at the ice mountain before them in astonishment. They saw a black figure continuously enlarging in size. "There's someone inside?" he said in surprise. "He's coming out." As the figure continued to enlarge, the contours of his limbs, chest, abdomen, and head became increasingly clearer. It was as if he would leap out from the ice mountain at any moment. "He's coming," Edward said solemnly. "How is that possible? He should still be in the seal. Who on earth is he?" In that instant, the 7 of them were on their guard to the extreme. Violent Ring's energies burst out from their bodies, and 7 streams of light pierced the ocean like 7 huge fireballs sinking into the bottom of the sea. The surrounding ice layers cracked crazily, and a large number of bubbles rose up. The entire ice mountain started to tremble. At the next moment, under the 7 people's astonished gazes, the figure turned into the size of a normal person. It was as if he was stuck to the surface of the ice mountain. Then with a smack, he stepped out. It was a silver-haired and silver-eyed young man. There seemed to be only coldness left in the young man's silver eyes. He stood steadily in the seawater like a stabilizing force. With his appearance, the entire world seemed to have calmed down. The tremors caused by the explosion of the 7 gushes of powers from earlier all disappeared. The ice mountain regained its calmness, and the ice plains under his feet showed no signs of cracking or melting. There was a calming force in his eyes. It was as if as long as he was around, the world would continue to operate according to the rules, and humans would continue to live according to the rules. When the young man's gaze swept past the 7 of them, Edward and the others could not help but have this feeling rise in their minds. To think that he has already broken through the seal? Edward cried out inwardly, "How can this be? But if he has broken through the seal long ago, then—" An uncontrollable curiosity rose in Edward's heart. The Gold Army's persistence toward the truth and the unknown allowed him to break through the other party's astonishment. He lifted his head and asked, "When did you break through the seal?" "Break through the seal?" The silver-haired young man's voice rang out in the 7 people's minds. "Are you talking about being sealed in ice? I was able to enter and leave this place freely about 7 years ago." Hearing the other party's reply, Edward and the others were even more astonished. Edward could not help but ask, "Then why didn't you return to Earth?" Chapter 945. Why did he not return to Earth? This was also the question and doubt in everyone's hearts. Hearing Edward's question, the silver-haired young man lowered his head, looked at the ice plains under his feet, and said calmly, 10 years ago, I regained my ability to think. I quietly accumulated my powers in this ice-cold ocean of hydrogen and helium on this uninhabited planet, slowly whittling away Howell's life. Howell was the Cyan Army's commander, an expert who had been sealed in ice together with Silver. 7 years ago, I finally wiped out Howell's will and physical body completely, causing him to disappear from this world forever, the silver-haired young man continued. However, my emotions were also accumulated to an extreme point due to being sealed in ice for a long period of time. They were like volcanoes. If I were to recover my emotions directly, the long period of emotional blankness would cause me, who had suddenly gained emotions, to become irritable, easily angered, and fickle. I might destroy the entire world because of this. Therefore, in the time that followed, I tried to recover my emotions bit by bit, whittling away the uncontrollable part of me. However, it was much harder than I had imagined, the silver-haired young man said, shaking his head. It was then that I realized that even though I could flatten the entire world with a wave of my hand, I was still unable to casually kill off my thoughts. Therefore, I tried to control my raging emotions and trim them carefully, preventing the damage they could cause to Earth. And the method was to think. I thought about the world's circulation and the nature of life time and time again. 5 years ago I started to be able to see the waves in space, the pressure of gravity, the folds of the world. 3 years ago I was able to see some images of the future. I saw the world's origin, and I seemed to have seen my own destruction. 1 year ago I sensed evil from a distant space-time and tried to stop them from coming to this universe. Until now, when you guys returned to Saturn. The silver-haired young man looked at Edward and asked with an indifferent tone, "What happened?" I sensed that a great change was about to take place on Earth. Urbian. Edward said the other party's name softly. Right now, Urbian's eyes were filled with an unfathomable terror. The feeling the other party gave him right now was not that of a human. Instead, it was like a black hole, engulfing all thoughts, waves, and light that attempted to probe him. He said, "We've been attacked." As he spoke, he told them everything about Feng Xinjian. Finally, he added, "Feng Xinjian is too powerful, and he has no principles at all. He wantonly slaughters on Earth, threatening the stability of the entire planet. Urbian, we need your help." Urbian didn't say anything. He just raised his hand and looked at the silver sword in his hand. An incomparably vast will, like the galaxy in the sky, delved into it and looked at it. At the sight of this, the countenance of the Green Army's Ming Wang changed drastically. It was because he had no idea when Urbian had taken the Thunder Calamity sword from his hand. The others looked at each other, and there seemed to be some regret in their eyes. What kind of assistance are we looking for? Meanwhile, Urbian's will had already retreated from the Thunder Calamity in that instant. The silver longsword was once again in Ming Wang's hand, causing Ming Wang's expression to darken and turn extremely ugly. "He should have been the one who forged this sword," Urbian said calmly. "It's true that he's stronger than you guys. If I were to kill him, I'd need about 96 seconds. Let's go. It's true that we can't allow him to destroy Earth. The world's order needs to be re-established." As Urbian spoke, he waved his hand, and everyone present flashed and appeared several 100,000 kilometers away. Edward's countenance changed. Reverse curvature superluminal speed? He raised his head and looked at the starlight in the surroundings being dragged into many long lines, and the astonishment on his face grew. He's already able to distort space to move at superluminal speed? Edward looked at Urbian, and his heart grew increasingly heavy. How much has he grown? Was it right or wrong for us to seek Urbian's assistance this time around? However, he didn't kill the King of Trepidation immediately. Does this mean that his sense of justice is no longer as prejudiced as it was over 10 years ago? Just then, Edward's gaze, which was sweeping across the surroundings, suddenly narrowed. Wait a minute, why are there only 7 people left? Where's the King of Trepidation? Edward felt as if all his hairs were standing up. However, no matter how he looked around, he could not find the King of Trepidation. The King of Trepidation had disappeared unknowingly. Other than Edward, the other commanders in the surroundings did not seem to have noticed this. Just as Edward was astonished by this strange change, he looked toward Urbian, wanting to ask him something. However, when he turned his gaze over, he discovered that Urbian had unknowingly looked toward him. A hint of a strange smile appeared on Urbian's face. For some reason, Edward felt that Urbian's face was extremely pale, just like that of a dead person. On Earth, Feng Xinjian's heart suddenly throbbed. He lifted his head, and the gleam in his eyes burst out. It was as if his eyes had pierced through layers of void space, and were looking in the direction of Saturn. Feng Xinjian stood up slowly, and the entire sacred white crevice kept on trembling. It was as if there was some power that wanted to break through the entire space. After cultivating in seclusion for half a year, Feng Xinjian's current abilities had become increasingly terrifying. A total of 2,333 pages of the Book of Wisdom had been analyzed, and Fang Xinjian's understanding of the entire world had also reached a new level. His instant sword was just one step away from achieving a qualitative breakthrough. His heart sword path had also improved tremendously through his experiments on the various armies' warriors. Even the immortal child's emotions would be slightly affected when he was before him. Did you sense it? The immortal child's body appeared next to Fang Xinjian and said, "What a strong evil intent." Fang Xinjian said, "I need to enter seclusion for a period of time to fully focus on comprehending the final stage." The immortal child fell silent for a moment before saying, "Although Saturn is over 1 billion kilometers away from us, with that person's abilities, we can't eliminate the possibility that he has means to move at light speed or even superluminal teleportation. He might have arrived on Earth while you're in seclusion." The immortal child's gaze sank as he said, "If you're going to enter seclusion, you must find a place where he can't find you." Fang Xinjian nodded. He was not worried that the other party would arrive on Earth while he was in seclusion. After all, he did not have any trusted aides on Earth. The only thing he had to worry about was not letting the other party find him while he was in seclusion. However, the immortal child still said, "Are you sure you want to enter seclusion? How confident are you in attaining a breakthrough?" The immortal child still felt that it was a little risky to enter seclusion at this moment. Fang Xinjian looked at his palm and sensed waves of sword intense seething in his body. It was as if the half a year of cultivation had suppressed them to an extreme. Just a little bit more and my sword arts will be able to attain another breakthrough. Chapter 946. Hearing Fang Xinjian's words, the immortal child's heart skipped a beat. Over the past half a year, Fang Xinjian was not the only one who had been improving. The immortal child was also cultivating in seclusion, sorting out what he had learned in the past. The Holy Sea of Truth had a great background and countless legacies. There were too many things that were suitable for him to cultivate, and he was also very clear about the path after Tier 6 of the divine level. Many of the knowledge in the microscopic world was also in Miracle World's version. Therefore, he was improving almost at every moment. However, after half a year, he had merely digested the powers and knowledge he had obtained from attaining a breakthrough to the divine level. Although he had been getting stronger, to make another breakthrough on the basis of absorbing his past improvements, he looked at Fang Xinjian, nodded, and said, "It's good that you're confident. If you can really attain a breakthrough, it'll be more beneficial to our plan this time around." With that, his body slowly shattered and gradually disappeared. "Then I'll be waiting for you to come out of seclusion for the time being." After deciding on his future strategy with the immortal child, Fang Xinjian left the sacred white crevice and charged out of the atmospheric layer with a move. Going into seclusion at full force was not just to use all of his energy on the instant sword and the derivation of his heart sword path. Fang Xinjian also planned to withdraw all of his powers and focus fully on attaining a breakthrough. The path of martial arts had always been one of advancing boldly and vigorously. Now that he was going into seclusion to attain a breakthrough, Fang Xinjian naturally planned to give it his all. He had long since decided where he would go into seclusion. It would be the center of the solar system, the place where 99% of his powers were gathered, the sun's interior. One reason was because there was a tremendous amount of energy that he could draw from at any time. The other reason was because of the star's vastness. The sun's volume was over 100,000 times that of Earth. What kind of concept was that? Even if Fang Xinjian wanted to search for a target on 100,000 Earths, it would take him many years. Moreover, the electromagnetic waves and heat energy in the sun's interior were extremely chaotic, making it even more difficult to search for a target. Even if the other party was stronger, wanting to search for Fang Xinjian, who was in seclusion in the sun, would be like searching for a needle in a haystack. It would be almost impossible for them to find a substance that was less than 1 cubic meter in such a place. Therefore, no matter what the other party's strategy was, they would have to wait for Fang Xinjian to come out of seclusion before they could take action. This would allow Fang Xinjian to be fully prepared. 8 minutes later, Fang Xinjian arrived inside the sun. All of his powers and will merged into one in that instantly. Fang Xinjian could sense waves of seething power in his body. It was as if the mountains and rivers were roaring and stars explode. Fang Xinjian's Xian Fang. Fang Xinjian's Fang Xinjian. Martial will, Xian Fan had. Fang Xian over. After half a year, the cultivation, martial Fang had training, the Fang Sun, Aa Fang Xinjian's martial, Hu Fang with Xinga realm, he. After reaching 8,000 points in his martial will, he would only be able to increase by 1 point almost every over 10 days. Moreover, the speed was getting increasingly slower. Clearly, he had reached a bottleneck. However, a martial will of 8,000 points was already terrifying enough. It could be said that toppling mountains and overturning seas with a flip of his hand was nothing much. He could even move the tectonic plates of continents and change the direction of the geographical vein. However, no matter how strong his powers were, there would be a limit to the increment in his battle prowess if his realm was not high enough. He would still not be able to win against Tier 6 or even 7 divine level expert. Therefore, this was why Fang Xinjian wanted to achieve another breakthrough in the instant sword, bringing forth new ideas in the celestial eradication sword technique. Amidst the endless high-temperature flames, Fang Xinjian sat cross-legged. Countless data, formulas, and information kept on jumping out in his mind. At the next moment, a black dot took form before him. As the small black dot moved, the surrounding space was compressed. Light rays and flames gradually became distorted, forming an invisible longsword. The infiltrating void sword uses the Earth's astral powers as its foundation. At the next second, streams of lightning flashed, and the fire waves within a range of 1,000 lis were split apart by an invisible force. It was as if they had been swept by a sharp sword. The all-conquering sword activates the heavenly thunders and terrestrial magnetism forces to circulate. There's nothing it can't cut through and nothing it can't slash through. A breath later, the sea of flames closed up once again, and a myriad of sword light suddenly burst out from Fang Xinjian's body. It was as if a sun had risen up, emitting an extremely piercing glow that caused the surrounding solar sea of flames to appear dark. At the next moment, the light and shadows changed. It was as if countless swordsmen could be seen performing sword arts amidst the solar sea of flames. Each and every move was capable of shattering the world. It was as if there were really countless divine-level experts engaged in a great battle. The light pursuit sword integrates the profoundness of the heavenly thunders and terrestrial magnetism forces, the Earth's astral powers and nuclear powers. Not only can it kill enemies with sword light, but it can also control electromagnetic signals, change the 5 senses, and form illusory art. At the next moment, the myriad of sword light disappeared, and the entire sea of flames seemed to have regained its peace. However, the peace did not last for too long. Suddenly, streams of black sword marks appeared in void space, slashing through the flames, heat energy, and light rays. It was as if a corner of space had suddenly disappeared. The instant sword requires a strong grasp of the heavenly thunders and terrestrial magnetism forces, the Earth's astral powers, nuclear powers, and the forces that cause all living things to decay. In the past, I was still a little lacking. However, with the knowledge I've obtained from the Book of Wisdom and my martial will at 8,000 points, I can attempt to attain a breakthrough. At the thought of this, Fang Xinjian's gaze narrowed. In that instant, all the flames within a range of 100 lis came to a standstill. They were like frozen ice sculptures, not moving at all. Just a little bit more. Just a little bit more. while Fang Xinjian was cultivating in seclusion in the sun to comprehend the instant sword, 1 hour after he left Earth. Urbian, who had been compressing space and moving at superluminal speed, had arrived on Earth. Standing outside the atmospheric layer, and looking down at the blue planet under his feet, Urbian revealed a hint of nostalgia in his eyes. This was Earth, his hometown, the place of origin that he had left for a very long time. With a slight thought, an extremely powerful electromagnetic wave burst out from his mind, sweeping across the entire Earth at the speed of light. Of course, it was impossible for him to process all the details of Earth, down to the atomic information, with a single thought. However, he could sense that many battles were erupting. Sensing the chaos on Earth, Urbian's countenance sank. "Where is Fang Xinjian?" Fang Xinjian asked directly. Urbian had always done things in a simple and straightforward manner. After arriving on Earth, he planned on solving the problem directly. He should still be in the Sacred White Crevice. The White Army's Sacred White Crevice is probably near the Tiegai mountain pass in the western section of the Kunlun Mountains. Urbian nodded. At the next moment, everyone turned into a meteor and landed in the sky above the Kunlun Mountains. Chapter 947. Looking at the vast snowy mountains before them, he said, "The Sacred White Crevice was created by the White Army's first commander. It's an additional space that is independent from this universe. If one wishes to enter, they'll have to find the entrance they set up. However, their entrance will change every once in a while, and it has always been a top secret. However, we can follow the people who go out to purchase goods and think of a way to find the entrance." Just as he was explaining how to enter the Sacred White Crevice, Urbian put out his palm and tore it gently. The space before them was like a white canvas being torn apart, revealing the canvas beneath it. It was a pure white world. At the sight of this scene, the hearts of the other 6 commanders skipped a beat. Tearing space apart? Edward shook his head. No, it's not tearing. It seems to be transforming and shifting, stacking the 2 spaces together. This way, we'll be able to enter the Sacred White Crevice directly. Edward was the only one present who could see this. After all, at the level of having grasped space, Urbian's actions were already hard for the other commanders to understand. However, regardless of whether they understood or not, everyone present once again sensed how powerful Urbian was. The latter seemed as if he did not feel anything. With a single step, he entered the Sacred White Crevice. The other commanders looked at each other and walked in one after another. In the end, when it was Grade's turn, he intentionally lagged behind by a step. He sent out an invisible physical aura from his fingertip, darting into the ground and disappearing. "Urbian, this guy's strength is too terrifying. After he deals with Fang Xinjian, it'll probably be our turn. If that's the case, I'll have to make my preparations in advance." At the thought of this, his countenance sank. He took a step forward and entered the Sacred White Crevice as well. Arriving in the pure white world of the Sacred White Crevice, Urbian lifted his head and looked around. The secrets of the entire space seemed to have appeared before his eyes. Amazing! To be able to create another space and rebuild another world. Although it's still not perfect, the first commander of the White Army is probably just a step away from coming into contact with my current realm. As expected of someone who fended off the first onslaught. Urbian's words sounded extremely arrogant, but in the ears of the crowd it was only natural. It could be said that if anyone else on Earth were to say these words, they would be arrogant and ignorant. Only when Urbian said these words, it would be in an upright manner. It was because in the memories of Edward and the others, none of the commanders in the 13 armies' history had reached Urbian's current realm. No one had ever done it before, and no one would be able to do it in the future. This sentence suddenly popped up in Edward's mind. At the same time, Urbian also moved. he spread out his 5 fingers and swiped his palm in the direction of the world before him. It was as if his hand was brushing across a canvas. Wherever his palm passed, the originally pure white world seemed to be dyed with a layer of color. The mountains, rivers, birds, beasts, and flowers had all turned from pure white to having their own colors, appearing extremely lively. It was as if the original canvas had turned into a real world. How did he do this? Reverend Fahue looked at this scene in astonishment. He knew that everything in the sacred white crevice had been materialized from the white ring's energy. However, he could no longer understand how Urbian had turned all of these into reality. The other commanders were also extremely astonished. As for the White Army's warriors who were staying in the sacred white crevice, they were alarmed at the very first moment. As streams of white light pillars soared into the sky, several tens of the White Army's warriors flew into the sky. All of them looked at the tremendous changes in the world in astonishment, unable to understand what was happening. However, Urbian did not stop. After dyeing the entire sacred white crevice with color, he also raised his other hand and grabbed out fiercely. With this grabbing action, the entire sacred white crevice trembled. It was as if Urbian's palm had grabbed the entire space, caught it. With a soft bellow, Urbian's hands, which were grabbing out at space, slowly put together. As he did this, everything in the world trembled intensely. Even Edward and the other commanders felt an intense pressure. It was as if the entire world was pressing down on them, and every single particle in their bodies was suffering from intense pressure. Priest Longmai, Priest Tai, and the other members of the White Army's upper echelon all felt an intense sense of danger. What's going on? Who's attacking the sacred white crevice? Run! Some people fled toward the outside world, some attempted to find the source of the attack, and some even unleashed their powers in an attempt to resist the omnipresent pressure. However, it was too late. As Urbian's hands accelerated abruptly, the entire sacred white crevice's small world seemed to have turned into a canvas. With a grab and pull, the canvas shrank rapidly toward his hand. In the blink of an eye, the entire sacred white crevice was like a canvas covering the real world. With a pull, Urbian kept it in his palm. Meanwhile, Urbian, Edward, and the others had already returned to the real world. A ball of white light kept on flashing on Urbian's palm. If one were to take a closer look, they would be able to see countless plants, bamboo, and rocks, as well as the stunned expressions of the White Army's warriors. Edward stared at the light circle in Urbian's hand and shouted, "What did you do? How did you do that?" The scene just now had far exceeded his understanding of the world. In his eyes, it was completely like magic. Urbian looked at the sacred white crevice in his hand and said calmly, "It's like holding an oil painting on a table tightly in one's hand. It's about the same action." Ignoring the other commander's astonishment, Urbian shook the sacred white crevice in his hand and said, "That Fang Xinjian isn't inside." "He's not here?" He said, "Then he might be at another base. We can release the warriors in the sacred white crevice, especially Longmai. He should know where Fang Xinjian is." "I've asked him. He doesn't know." The image of the small world in his hand appeared in Urbian's mind, and he said calmly, "But it's fine. I want to reorganize the various factions on Earth. If he comes out to obstruct me, I'll just kill him. If he doesn't come out to obstruct me, I won't deliberately target him either. Although he's strong in my eyes, he's not much different from an ordinary commoner. There's no need to give him special treatment." Chapter 948. Everyone present agreed with Urbian's words. At his level of strength, it was true that he did not need to care about a mere Fang Xinjian. It was the same for He, Edward, and the others. Right now, Fang Xinjian's matter was no longer important. What was important was Urbian's attitude. In order to deal with a monster, they had released an even more terrifying monster. However, there was no use in feeling regretful. The problem was that Urbian wanted to reform Earth. God knew what kind of things he would do with his character. The entire earth would probably welcome a tremendous change. Their thoughts were not wrong, but they had still underestimated Urbian's current battle prowess. Right now, both Urbian's strength and knowledge were as deep as the ocean. After over 10 years of dedicated cultivation, he had integrated into space and controlled it. His battle prowess had reached an unbelievable level, and he was comparable to a Tier 6 divine-level expert in Miracle World. Urbian casually tossed the sacred white crevice to Edward. Edward caught it in a panic and discovered that this lump of white light was as light as air. It was as if it did not have any mass at all. Urbian raised his hand gently, and everyone flew up into the sky with a swoosh. In the blink of an eye, they broke through the atmospheric layer and arrived in outer space. Under their feet, the blue planet rotated slowly, and they could clearly see the distribution of the continents and oceans. What is he trying to do? Is he trying to kill all the rioters in one go? Justice, justice. This guy's justice is hell to some people. Just as the 6 commanders were guessing what Urbian was going to do, they heard his voice ringing out in their mind. Because humans live in different environments, different regions, different languages, and different cultures, there are different kinds of conflicts. Today, I want books to be of the same language, cars to be on the same track, and people to be of the same mind. As Urbian spoke, he opened his mouth slightly, and streams of silver energy gushed out from his body. They were like clouds and fog that encompassed the planet under his feet. As more and more silver fog descended from the sky, Urbian's body seemed to start melting as well. In the end, he also turned into a part of the fog and descended into the mortal world. At this moment, Urbian released all of his power. At Urbian's current realm, the shape and size of his body no longer had any meaning. He could maintain his human form or transform into all sorts of strange things with a single thought. Having a thorough understanding of the microscopic world, he could already simulate 99% of the natural phenomena in the universe. At this level, he could be said to be omnipotent to mortals. Once a Tier 6 divine-level expert like this started a battle, their energy and will would dissipate, and there would be no so-called physical body. It was just like Feng Shijian's clones. Any one of them could be a clone, and any one of them could also be the physical body. It was because they were all a part of his body to begin with. For example, when Urbian turned into a cloud and enveloped the atmosphere, it was a direct effect of power on the microscopic level. It was equivalent to his entire body melting into space. His existence itself was no longer a life form, but a phenomenon. The 6 commanders could sense that immense power spreading out in the world. It was boundless, and all of them were shocked by the power before them. The immortal child, who was hiding in the depths of the earth, could sense it even more deeply. Spatial translocation, merging into space, and reaching the ends of the microscopic world. This is a standard Tier 6 divine-level expert. Sighing inwardly, the immortal child's countenance turned increasingly grim. It was because he knew that at this level, if one wished to kill the other party, they would have to kill and deplete all of the other party's energy. It was because the other party no longer had a conjured physique to restrain them. Right now, Urbian could be a gust of wind, a gust of fire, a bolt of lightning, a drop of rainwater that fell from the 9 heavens, a fish in the depths of the ocean, a thought in the minds of a crowd, or a wave in a radio signal. At this realm, experts would exist as long as their power and will existed. There was no fixed pattern to their physical forms. However, most people were still used to maintaining their human form. After all, as long as they were in human society, the human form would always be the most convenient. Although they could take on many forms, when it came to battle, different people would naturally have different strongest forms. In Miracle World, this form was known as the virtual image. Condensing the virtual image and adding all sorts of powerful abilities to the virtual image through incessant cultivation and research was the main battle prowess of experts at this stage. The virtual image was the product of the cultivators' continuous cultivation and integration of their newest knowledge. Due to the differences in culture, background, experiences, or legacies, the virtual image condensed by each person would have different appearances and abilities. In ordinary battles, Tier 6 divine level experts would be able to defeat any enemies below this realm just by relying on spatial translocation. Once they went all out, they would have to release their virtual image to fight against their enemies. For example, although Urbian did not have Miracle World's martial arts system, he had still comprehended the method to unleash his full powers. Right now, in order to change the earth, he used his strongest form, the heavenly river. With a rumble, accompanied by an explosion that resounded throughout the world, the overwhelming silver mist had already turned into a river that filled the sky. The silver river water was like the legendary Milky Way, surging and flowing in the sky. No one knew how much water it contained. At this moment, countless people on Earth stopped what they were doing. Regardless of whether they were working, playing, fighting, or taking examinations, almost everyone looked toward the sky, revealing astonished expressions as they looked at the silvery heavenly river that was gushing forth. At the next moment, the silver heavenly river in the sky paused for a moment before charging down toward the ground. The billowing heavenly river descended from the sky, and its majestic aura was extremely astonishing. It was as if it wanted to drown the entire world in this silver ocean. Ah! Countless agonizing cries and astonished cries rang out. Looking at the boundless silver river that filled up the sky, everyone was unable to summon any strength to resist. Only endless despair lingered in their hearts. This was a natural disaster that could destroy the entire human world. At the next moment, the heavenly river collided into the ground. Just as everyone thought that they would be engulfed by the endless waves, they discovered that wherever the heavenly river passed by, everything would disappear. There was no collision as they had imagined. There was only disappearance. The endless heavenly river first landed on the East Asian continent. Wherever it passed by, regardless of whether it was people, buildings, cars, or even mountains, rivers, and continents, everything disappeared. You're tuning in to the Phoenix Nights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.